you're hunting horns. It's like, no, I'm hunting for a challenge of it, just like you are. And, for me to shoot a 200, and I would never take that away from you because I understand it. It's like if someone in Pennsylvania shooting a deer like this, maybe it's just as hard for them as it would be for me to find a 200 someplace. So I'm not taking anything away from it. It's like, don't concentrate on the size of a deer, the size of the rack, something like that. It's the challenge for you personally is what drives us all. I mean, hunting in northern Minnesota, like we talked at the beginning, just seeing a buck was like the point where he about hyperventilate and faint and fall out of the tree. For me to get that, again, it's like a drug addict. You never you're trying to chase that first high that you have from your deer hunt. Now I need to try to find a 200 to get that same feeling. So it's not any different than somebody shooting their first deer or whatever. So don't try to compare it that way. It's not like, hey, I'm better than you or a better hunter than you or I have a better place than you. We're all trying to do the same thing.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt Podcast, and I'm joined by Lee Lakosky. Lee, it's a pleasure to get to interview and to also thank you for letting me come out here and chat.
This is great. I love doing these. It's like anytime you sit around and talk hunting or deer or something like that, it's always awesome. It's just nice to be able to sit face to face and talk, and just if it worked out good that you were out here in Iowa, so, and just, heck, I was out working all day and we just I got done working, you got done working, bang, let's do it. So
yeah, it's so funny because I from watching you for years and everything and seeing, and everyone I've talked to that's met you has spoken very highly of you and your work ethic. And it's funny just seeing it. Like I'm texting you, hey, I'll be there in like 30 minutes. And you're like, all right, I should be getting, I'll be in a skid steer by the time you pull in, and you're like, I've been out all day working.
Yeah, if they leave at 7, I would have still been out, doing stuff until dark. And, and some days it's not, it's getting to work time now. We had a little bit of break, between shed season and here, so you can get spend time with the kids and stuff more. But now it's like, hey, we're getting to go time here. Yeah,
yeah. It's a never ending thing, and especially with you with doing. I mean, do you do most of the land management yourself?
Pretty much. I mean, I have a couple guys that work for me. One, Steven, works pretty much full time. Except for weekends, Steven, when I'm out by myself working, and he takes the weekends off. And then George's been with us people have been watching from way back and getting close. George is probably one of the first guys we met when we were, even before we started getting close. The first TV show, met him out at the NWTF show in Nashville. So he's been with us ever since, but he's just kind of like part-time stuff. He's kids there in golf and has all kinds of stuff. So, whenever he can help. So it's basically just 2.5 of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so it's a lot. And, you're talking, you got, Illinois here. We had Kansas stuff up until just recently, and, buying stuff out in Montana now. And it's getting, we thought it was far going to Illinois, but now going out to Montana and everything. So you stretch yourself pretty thin, but I don't know what I'd do if you weren't. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard you say that before about like just, it's, when it comes to deer hunting and really just anything in general, is just the challenge of something and looking for what's kind of next and just keep continually pushing yourself. And I see that, from expanding into Montana and other things of just continually, I don't think you could stop.
No, I don't think so either. Because even with whitetails, they're different in different states and different places and stuff. So we just want to keep learning stuff. And it's like, for me, it's like if it felt like, that you had something figured out, well, then it really wouldn't be that fun anymore. It's a challenge. Like you said, I think, kind of getting towards the top of whitetail stuff where, in all different states and done everything, and as much as you can possibly do, go take whitetail hunting as far as you can take it, basically, I feel. So, but I still love it, but it's still like, I want some more challenging, some more challenges and stuff like that. So that's why we started, out in Montana. Let's try for elk and mule deer and antelope and all that kind of stuff, and just take all the, the years of management and, age class, trophy management stuff, and let's just take it to some other species and some other states. And, so it's new. It's just, again, learning stuff every day. So I always tell people too, it's like any chance you get to go hunt anything, go and do it, because you just don't realize how much you learn on everything you do. And that's just not hunting. That's just everything in life. So it's like, the hunting wise for sure. And every time you go, and like, I just love spot and stalking antelope. And that was a cheap hunt that we could do way back before we were even married. It wasn't that expensive, but man, we never sit on, not that we haven't, they sit on a water hole, but say, go try to chase those things around and try to spot and stalk them. With the, the wide open, you're crawling and stuff like that, but it just makes you so much better at like your elk and mule deer and all those other things. And just, then we start going out west, and you start, and sheep hunting and all that stuff. It's like, if you think you're going to get within, you can get within 40 yards of a sheep for sure, but you better be prepared if you're bow hunting to be shooting at 100 yards or more. So you start really shooting long distance and all that stuff, and how far equipment's come and everything else, and how accurate you can be with them, and then just learning animals, their body language, when you can shoot, when you can't, and, if they're too far, if they're alert at all or something, so, to be ethical on it too. But then that just totally changed our game for whitetails. When it used to be a 40-yard shot was too far. And now it's like, if you look around this room, if you take down your deer that you've shot, 40 yards and over, you take half the room down, So it's just, like I said, everything you do, you're just learning something, and makes you a better hunter, and, as far as hunting wise, but still, even just your management stuff, taking different animals, different states. And, it's just, I just got to keep challenging yourself on everything, I think.
Yeah. It's funny because, growing up, I was telling you a little bit beforehand, but I grew up in Pennsylvania hunting just the big woods areas, and that's just that's all I knew growing up. And then starting to expand and doing a little bit of different states for whitetail, and then started going out west. And the podcast is called East Meets West because I wanted to learn more about hunting out west. And now that's like, I'm known as the whitetail guy in Pennsylvania, but that's what I love to do, and this challenges of going out there and just going to new places and seeing how they interact in those different places is cool, because each experience kind of compounds, because you learn something. Say you're hunting spot and stalk in some of the open country in Montana that you can apply to hunting mule deer here or there. Right. Like there's so much that can be applied. It's
great. I'm sure you're just like me. Obviously, if there's only one thing I could hunt the rest of my life, it'd be whitetails, because they are just the craziest animal. They're hardest to figure out. They're so unique. Every antler is different, and they're just such a cool animal. But, people ask you what's your favorite thing. I was like, well, I like spot and stalk and mule deer. It's probably like my favorite. And then, and elk hunting and stuff too, because you just don't get to hear them scream every day. Like you said, you look out your window, I see deer all the time.
Yeah.
And, and even like for our kids, it's like, it's hard to try to figure out, okay, how do we play this right? Not push them at all. But I think I just loved whitetail so much because we lived in the city. In Minneapolis, and we never saw any deer, so it was like, a big deal to see one. Even where we hunted up in northern Minnesota, there was hardly any deer up there, with more wolves than there were deer. But so your kids just kind of get, and there's deer all over in the yard, and you see big deer and everything else. It's like they kind of get immune to it. So you're like, well, okay, how do we play this that I just don't want them to take it for granted?
Yeah.
So it's tough, but like I said, just the same thing. We like you get to whitetail hunt so much, but you kind of take it for granted. But so when you go out and you do those other hunts out west in the mountains and something totally out of your element, it's just so much fun. But I wouldn't say that if there's only one thing, it'd still be whitetails, but it'd probably have more fun hunting out there. Yeah. It's hard to say. People are like, what? You like some hunting more than whitetails? Like, just because you can hunt whitetails, we live them, so it's just something you do a little different.
Yeah.
And you only get to do it for a week or a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever, a year. So it's, it makes it that much more special when you don't have 3 months or 4 months to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Like I live, it's so funny. I work so much for like those Septembers. Like I think of that as like the pinnacle. Now I'm doing work all year as far as for the whitetail side of things too, but for some reason that's always in the forefront of my mind of like, where am I going in September? What tags am I drawing? What am I doing? And just I've just become so obsessed with like a place. Like I love places, cool places to be able to go and see,
right.
and it's awesome to be able to do so. I mean, one of the reasons here I'm in Iowa, like I was telling you earlier, I haven't hunted much of the Midwest, like traditional ag country, and trying to take what I've learned for the last 20 years of hunting the big woods areas and applying that to some of this broken up type ground and trying to learn it. And I was just out today, like I was like a kid in the candy store, like just running around looking at sign and trying to figure out, okay, what are these deer doing? Why are they doing it here? Is it, is this, similar to other places? So it's cool to get to do that.
And I know exactly how you feel, because like I said, I grew up in Minneapolis, but we hunted up in way northern Minnesota. It was just woods. There's no agriculture up there. So that was the same thing for me when I first started. I remember you had a $500 car driving down to Iowa, and it wasn't even open at all to non-residents at that time. When I first started driving down here just to look at deer, and I was like, holy cow, we aren't seeing deer like that,
Yeah.
And, we thought they were monsters at the time, and maybe they were, but they were probably like, 150s and 60s and stuff like that. But for us, northern Minnesota, if you even saw 100-inch deer, I mean, you were doing something,
Yeah.
I mean, not that there aren't some big deer in northern Minnesota. Obviously, there's the Minnesota monarch and the giants were up there, but not where we were. I mean, it was just, tamarack, cedar swamps and stuff, and you're lucky to get a little thing like that, if anything, So, coming down and seeing like the 130 to 150-inch deer, like pretty regular. When I was just a teenager growing up, and it was like, whoa, that was, that's something I got to look at. But that wasn't even open to non-residents in Iowa when it first came to come down. Not at all, yeah. So it's crazy. Like when it opened, so we started hunting down here, and I was probably 17 or 18 maybe. But you didn't have to apply like now. Like you said, you got 5 points now and stuff. But it was like, we never applied. There was just, I don't remember how many, if it was still 6,000 non-resident tags at that time, or if it was lower than that, but there'd be hundreds left over. So you just go and just stick a leftover, archery tag. And it was like that for years. I mean, it was years until, we hunted Kansas a ton and here. And then, man, it wasn't until late 90s, probably getting close to about the time we started our TV show. That was like in 2003. So it was probably around late 90s or even 2000. Where, well, man, you gotta put in for a draw, and maybe every other year or something like that now, or 2 years in a row, and maybe not one or something. And that's when it's like, all right, we got to move.
I love that mentality, but before we get in a little more in Iowa, I did want to ask you, because I'd heard you say this before about hunting in northern Minnesota, like and growing up, and I think. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you had said maybe it was your family that had a deer camp there.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep.
And like it was really just it was something just to shoot a deer, and then you started shooting some bucks up there. Is that correct?
Yeah. Shot a couple bucks, and and up there it's like if you just try to get a doe tag, which seems so odd for down here, because it was like that was the thing. It's like if you happen to get lucky enough to draw a doe tag, which is probably only 3 or 4 years you could even draw a doe tag, then you're like, oh my gosh, I have a chance to shoot one, because you're never going to see a buck. I mean, you never even see one. But then, like I said, my grandpa and, they started a deer camp up there, and then my dad and my uncles have started another one that was fairly close by and stuff. And, my grandpa just I grew up with him, trapping, and he taught me a lot of stuff, as well as my dad, my brother, and everything. But I remember my grandpa just had that big stack of magazines there, like Outdoor Life and those. And I wish I had all those still. But I would just sit up there and just page through those things. I was just obsessed. And I'm sure if you ask any of my aunts or uncles or cousins or anything, they say, yeah, I mean, I was possessed with it. I mean, the minute the sun was up, I was out and I had my BB gun or shotgun or 22, and I was out hunting something.
Yeah.
But just going deer hunting, and I'd read all those articles and stuff, and you're like, why are they shooting deer? I just thought that because you'd see all the tracks, and you'd see rubs and scrapes and stuff there. There probably was, now looking back at it, I bet you I could probably go up there and shoot a pretty decent buck now.
Yeah.
But back then, just the places that you were hunting, well, I can't see in the cedars, just get out in the big open hardwoods. And yeah, you'd see some does wander through there, but the bucks, like they're not going to walk that open hardwood stuff without it was all public hunting. So people were, hunting a lot and driving stuff. And
yep.
I mean, not that you ever saw anybody, but we would, they would kind of like, my uncles, they'd kind of start just walk through some of the cedar swamp stuff to even kick some out to somebody. And even if you did, I mean, it's such big open, it's like the chance of going by somebody are pretty slim. I think more than anything, people were bored and just want to get out and walk around a little bit.
Yep.
But, you'd see scrapes and rubs and stuff, and I just thought that I wasn't good enough. I just didn't know. They had to keep reading and stuff, and I just get so obsessed with it, but it really wasn't, like as good. A lot of the magazines or stuff, people hunting them in Texas and stuff like that, now that you've hunted all over the place, you realize that was probably the worst of the worst, the hardest of the hard to hunt. Probably maybe the same thing as for you in Pennsylvania, just in the big timber like that, where there is no food. I mean, and there was hardly any oaks up there. It was all just birch trees and tamarack swamps. I don't even know what they ate. Grass probably, or who knows? I don't think there's even any oak trees, barely up there. But it was popple and stuff like that. So I mean, they didn't have the ability to get really giant rack in that part, because they're just not much for nutrition, not even acorns or anything like that, So, but I think now I bet you I could go up there and make pretty short order. If there was a buck around of any kind, it would be pretty short order. I bet you I could shoot one up there now, knowing what I know now. But
yeah, I think it's funny you say that, because you also know Lee Ellis. So Lee is a good buddy of mine, and Lee he'd come up to Pennsylvania and he hunted with us. He did the gun season. We did some traditional, showing him deer drives and going through that, and he shot a buck. And just this past year, he's like, I keep thinking about, those woods, and he's like, I want to learn it. I want to bow hunt it. And so he started coming up, and he's just like a sponge at learning and wanting to learn and get better. And it's funny, the first day he hunted, he almost shot a 150-inch deer. And I told him, I said, Lee, I love you, buddy, and I really want you to be successful, but I wish it would take a couple more days at least, so it doesn't look like that it's
right.
But me saying that is just that I think when you learn some of those tendencies of mature deer and you can recognize that in other places, and whether it's the suburbs or whether it's Iowa or whether it's Pennsylvania or northern Minnesota, there's obviously different challenges to each of those places, but you learn some of those tendencies, I think.
For sure. I mean, I remember like a cousin of mine shot we thought it was a giant at the time. I mean, that was like the biggest deer on the earth. And it was probably maybe 135 or something like that, but a 10-point. But it was an old deer, the big body old deer up there. And that was probably, could be as big as they come up there, really, And so just seeing that. But there's likely some old deer up there, because there's just so much room. And like I said, it would be fun to go do it now, because now just know what I know now. I bet you I could go up there and probably shoot a pretty good old buck up there. If I had more time. It's the time thing. You get that from people all the time. Like, I'm coming to Virginia and shooting one. It's like, I wish I could. If I had time, I'd love to do everything. People think it's like you never want to do that. You have that, and say, no, I would. That's the stuff I would love to do. But you only have so much time, and you got you got TV shows to make, and you got kids, and so many things to take care of. It's not like when I was 18 and 19. I just had all the time, just go do whatever we wanted to. And time gets harder to come by when you get older.
Yeah. And like you're talking about as you transitioned, kind of moving down here and making that jump. And you also had mentioned about how people be like, oh, come to Virginia. And I'm sure you hear that a lot, or you have heard that a lot through the years. And I always think it's a funny thing, because there's like, when I look at someone like yourself, I'm like, I think it's incredible of what you have built, and what people don't see is the amount from where you started to where you've got to now, and what you've built through through hard work. And like the way I've always looked at it is, whether it's shooting, a 200-inch deer here in Iowa, or shooting a 120-inch deer in Pennsylvania, it all requires work. It's different. It's different whether it's if you're pounding public land, you're doing that. Maybe you're doing more boots on the ground scouting and doing things where those same hours, if not more, are going into you sitting in a tractor and doing things, and planning, and
it all takes time,
and creating the income to be able to buy properties and maintain equipment and do all those things. Like, I think. And I didn't mean to kind of go forward and try to answer the question there, but like for me, when I look at that, it's just like it honestly kind of pisses me off when I hear that sometimes of like, oh, if I had what Lee Lakosky has, I could go out and shoot whatever.
It used to, for me too, but now I just rolls off your back, And remember what any people say, because you just realize it's like, it's not their fault. I mean, obviously, everyone gets jealous of things and you try to downplay it, but you really realize the longer you do this that how much you have to learn, and that's just it comes down, like I said, work. If you don't have that work ethic, it's not going to happen. But it doesn't matter. It's like if you're gonna be a professional football player, it's not like you just wake up one day and you're 18 and go play in the pros. You work and you play every day from 5 years old up through high school and college, and you know how much work that takes. Mm-hmm. And to be a doctor or whatever, it's going to take a lot of work. And it's just the same as this. If you want to be successful, if you want a house full of deer heads, it's going to take a lot of work. Yeah. I don't care what place you have. You can have the best farm in the world. You aren't going to do that. Look at all the farms that we have. It's like, if I had your farm, well, nobody seemed to be too crazy about it when it was Elsie Craig's, before I bought it. Look at all the work. There wasn't 200-inch deer running around on every farm. There never has been. You got to create that space for them. It's like, it doesn't just happen. You don't say, oh, now I got this farm. I bought this farm in Iowa. Now I'm going to go back home. I'm going to fish all summer. I'm going to blow the dust off my bow October 1st. I'm going to go out and shoot a 200. It's like, well, it may happen, but you could do that anywhere. Yeah. It's like, if you want to consistently shoot deer, it's going to take a lot of work.
That's the key, the consistency part. Yes. That you just said. It's getting lucky is one thing, but being able to, again, be consistent with it is a whole nother level. And, when you, at what point did you buy your first property?
First place we bought was in Kansas, and that was like in 2000 maybe. And because I wasn't young by any means, because I mean, back when I was like in the 20s, I could go knock on doors anywhere, and anyone would let you hunt. I mean, it was basically, in the late 80s and 90s, before the real whitetail craze hit, I could knock on doors and anyone say, you want to try with a bow? Yeah, go ahead. Even people that hunted. And then you start seeing, like, when that started turning, you see archery equipment becoming, more and more sophisticated and more people doing it and stuff. And all of a sudden it was like, so I was just kicking along. I went to college, just dicked around basically so I could hunt, did, construction, did, other things just because I just spent all my time and focus. I'd make enough money to go on my next hunting trip and then do the same thing. I remember my sisters and they would say, man, you're never going to do anything, Lee. All you care about is hunting. And it's like, yeah, I just feel sorry for you. They don't have anything that you're that passionate about because it was like my whole life was that, but so then, it was probably like the 90s somewhere in there that all of a sudden you start knocking on all these people like, well, my grandson wants to hunt now. And you start seeing that and you're like, oh shit. So then it was like, all right, different game plan now. Go back, all the classes like in high school that you just failed out of math and you thought all that stuff. I mean, went back and just like, okay, well, what can I make some money on? Okay, engineering. Okay, that should work. What's the hardest one? What's the most highest paying one? Oh, chemical engineering is probably pretty hard. All right, let's do that. So just went right there. I mean, once I put my mind to it, because it was all hunting related. It wasn't like I cared about chemical engineering or calculus or physics or anything like that. It was all about deer. And it's like, so I'm going to just buckle it down if I can do it. I mean, I was just like, why did I think this was hard? Within like the first year after I was at the University of Minnesota, I was a tutor for chemistry, physics, and math, and so I was like, man, this is easy when you put your mind to it. But it took deer hunting for me to do that. If it was you could still knock on doors and it was available, I would have never done that. I know it because all I care about was deer.
Yeah.
And so I just did that. And so, heck, I think by the time we bought that first place, I was probably 30. Because I started back to college when I was like 22 or something like that. And then, took, 5 years to go through the chemical engineering thing, and then got a job there. And so my first year, probably like the first day I got a job. Okay. And back then it was, a lot, like 70,000 back then for a kid. I was like, holy crap. All right. Wow. So I came down. I don't think I worked for a week, and it was like, okay, let's buy a place. I was like, well, you need 20% down. I was like, damn, 20% down. So I just got lucky that my mom had passed away. So my dad was living by himself in his house. I said, well, Dad, can you sell me your house so I can take a loan for a house? I don't need 20% down. If you give me the money back, and so I can go buy a piece of land, and I'll just pay you back. And he was not good enough to do that for me. So that's how I got my first
Really?
farm. Yeah, first piece was just there's my dad allowing me to do that. And I did pay him back. Yeah, I did pay him back. So my sister's like, there's no way you're going to pay him back.
Yeah.
But everything has been like deer driven, just about everything had been, my entire life.
Yeah.
Point,
It is funny when you have something that you're so passionate about and driven towards, how all those other things fall into line, because when you have that big goal,
right,
that all the work that needs to come up to it, that's just a task to get through, versus like, looking at it as this, I just need to complete college to get a job. It's not, I don't know.
It's not the same. I went to college already. I had like a degree in economics, but it was just like, okay, because it's something you can just blow off, and what are you going to do with that? Nothing. It wasn't about that. It was just so I could feel like you're doing something, but it was all just about hunting, because I didn't have to get a real job. I can skip school, but it's pretty hard to skip work without getting fired.
Yeah.
So just doing what you could just to make it through as long as I could to, still hunt all that I wanted to. But, it's like everything, people like just find something you love doing and then you make a job out of it. But that's not really a reality for people. But it's, so the reality is, though, you find something you love, and then it's not necessarily you're going to have a job doing that. I mean, you and I just lucked out. I mean, that happened this way. But it was a chemical engineer for me. It just allowed me to buy land and do, be able to take all your vacation and doing that, but just allowed you to afford it. But it was the same thing. It's not because I loved chemical engineering. I loved oil refineries. I loved deer hunting, and I needed a job to do it. So that's the motivation that you have to have. And like I said before to my sisters and other people, it's like, if you don't have anything that you're just super passionate about, I feel almost sorry for you, because then what's the point? What are you working towards?
Yeah.
Is it just to exist? That's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Because I got so many things that I love to do that it just keeps me working every day.
Exactly. And it's funny looking back, and I hear like I've gotten advice from people that there's some that I recognized at the time that's helped me, and there's other things I wish I would have took advantage of more. But like when I realized that I wanted to work in this space and this is what I wanted to do, it was like I was working part-time in an archery shop, and then I was an environmental and safety engineer at a factory, and I was doing both of those, and I was like, all right, I need to clear all my debt to, student loans, truck, anything else I had before I could, take that jump and buy. But it helped me when having that goal of this is what I want to do, because I want to hunt more and I want to have that time. And honestly, even
focuses your attention on
it. And it was amazing how fast I was able to make that happen once I
set your mind to it.
But the thing I was going to say was, there was a guy I was working with at the time, and I know he actually just reached out to me here recently. Aaron, he had reached out and was like, hey, I listened to your podcast. I hadn't worked with him in a long time, but he was like, he gave me advice about buying land, and he had done that in Ohio. And then, he bought a small piece and then did some work to it, flipped it, bought a bigger piece. Now he owns a big chunk in Missouri and these other places. And that was something that I wish I started earlier. I've got a couple of small places now that I'm, but
we all do. But how old are you now?
32.
Yeah. See, I didn't even start. I didn't buy my first one until I was like in my 30s, and I didn't even like get married till I was 35, and like so, we didn't even start. Tiffany and I didn't really start anything till I was already like 35 before I even bought my first one, so it's not too late.
Yeah,
we've done pretty good here.
Yeah, no, I would say so.
So it's never too late.
Yeah, and it's also.
But I know what you're saying. Though. I wish I would have started earlier too. It could have been at this.
Yeah, and I'm not. That is not
but
me writing it off of like I'll never have that, because I believe I will, and I'm going to work towards that. But the thing is you hear of like, oh man, well, land was a lot cheaper then or whatever. But I feel like probably at that time, everyone thought it was expensive. It was always expensive or getting.
Yeah, it
harder.
didn't matter. Like because like back then, if it was. We bought our first piece in Iowa for like $530 an acre, but really it's not like you had the money you have now in your 50s. It was like, it was the first 100 acres or whatever, you're talking a lot of this stuff, when we bought that first farm, it was, 500,000. It might as well have been 500 million to me at that time, so it's always the same. It's never, it wasn't like the good old days back then, because you just didn't have the money then either. Through inflation and everything else, it's not that much different. So I always just tell people it doesn't matter. Just beg, borrow, steal, whatever you have to, and get the first little piece, whatever you can do to scrounge that first piece up. For me, it was taking a loan out to buy my dad's house, and he gave me the money. Okay, yeah. That's how I kickstarted it. But you have to grab that by the neck, wrestle it to the ground, and you say, you are not going to beat me. And you do that every day, and you'll get there. Just like you're saying, you need to, I'm going to pay this stuff off because I can do this. You see how fast you can pay stuff off, and you put your mind to it. And when you do stuff, but if if it's not really what you want, you might make an extra payment here or there, but you also know a year goes by, I made 2 extra payments,
Yeah.
But, just like for me, if I want something, I've always been that way though. I don't let it get to me. I don't let it win.
When you look at something like a big goal or something like that, do you I know you obviously have an engineering brain, which can sometimes be where you think very, very critically on things. But when it comes to big goals, it almost seems like you say, this is what I'm going to do, and then you figure out how it's going to.
Yeah, it's not well thought out beforehand.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. All right, yeah.
But I tell you, a lot of it is just pure hard work and a work ethic, and then people will see that. And you don't, I never had to go and sell myself. It was always through example. Like my buddy Tom, that he and I have been buying stuff together for 20 years or more. But like Tom worked so hard. He grew up on a farm, just didn't have a nickel to their names, and just worked his butt off. And he's smart and built a business. But so when I first moved down here, I knew Tom, but he didn't have any time. But he was building his company and making he had all that to do. But I was working just as hard down here to get all these properties and do all this stuff. As he would see, like he had bought in places before, and people always think, oh, here's a guy that's got some money. And people want to take advantage of people. Well, we need money for this, I never asked them for a nickel. I just did everything myself. I said, I'll go build the fence. I'll pay for it myself. I was just so happy that, hey, if I could afford 20 acres back then, but I go in with Tom and we have 120 acres, man, but I still get the 100. I can treat this 120 like it's mine, even though it wasn't. Man, and it was like the first time for him too. I'm sure if you asked him, he'd say, man, I never, everyone I had dealt with before, like with land and stuff, I was just took advantage of us, or tried to take advantage of it. He was smart enough to cut that off right away. But I guarantee he'd say that 20 years with Lee, if he says he's going to give me $20 worth of work, he'll give me 40 and never ask for the 20 back. So I just worked and worked and worked. And it's no different now, even in Montana. I don't have the money to buy these ranches, but I know people that do have the money for them, and they know that my work ethic is if they don't have the time to do it, all right, hey, let's go on together. I just like I started here, I'm buy smaller pieces of it, and they'll say, hey, they know what I'm going to do to that they know what my work ethic is. Hey, I'm going to go down there and kick butt, and we're going to make this thing unbelievably good. And then I never ask for it, but a lot of times we sell something and they'll say, hey, you got us, more than, we would ever sold this for. It's all on you. Our next one, we flip it. Instead of you owning 10%, I'm going to give you 20%.
Yep.
And I just worked my way that way. Never asking or never expecting. That wasn't my plan. It was just like, I'm just going to go. It's just was my nature. I'm going to go when something I love like that, I'm working my ass off. And people see that and they're like, and now after 20-something years of doing it, I think a lot of people see it. But at the time, I didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. It was just took that one person, just lucky to meet Tom. And I think in the same way, he'd say he was probably lucky to meet me.
Yeah.
Because, his investments in land over the years have, probably outperformed any stock stuff,
And I mean that's any good partnership on anything, and whether that's a good hunting partner or whether that's a business,
on it.
It helps to have someone that offsets, what, he had the money, you had the time and the drive to be able to pull that together. And I think it's such a valuable lesson on anything. And even just like the part of like not expecting thing. You're doing it because you obviously love it, but to let your work show for you, and then that's when
never ask for anything. And that's like one of the biggest piece of advice I'd give to people, like over the years, doing seminars and stuff. I was like, when I started out writing, like for a lot of the magazines and stuff, and I worked at an archery shop like you for years, and so when I started writing, I just used the products that I liked. At the time, it was Matthews and Realtree and ScentLock and all that stuff. And I just pushed them. I never asked for anything. I never call Matthews and say, hey, can you give me a bow or anything like that? I just bought them. Just working at the archery shop was nice because you got discounts on things and you got to shoot every bow under the sun. I started with PSE and, shot those, shot Hoyts. I shot everything, Dartons, everything back in the day. And so you just kind of got what you liked, and that's what you just kind of put in the photos and stuff for articles. But I never asked anyone for anything. So then when we started doing the TV show, and we were going to the ATA show, and I met a lot of those people through the ATA show just from going to, going there through the archery shop. And at the time, I met Don and Candy and Waddell and all those guys. And like Waddell was just a cameraman. He wasn't, so we were all kind of the same age, and we'd hang out and stuff and just had a blast at those shows and stuff. And, the Drurys and Jay and Tammy Gregory and all, we're all kind of the same age group. So we just had a blast, doing that stuff. But we didn't have any TV show or anything. I was just an engineer at the time, We just got to know them through the show, the ATA show. And so then when we decided to do it, so then I went to the Matthews and ScentLocks and stuff like that. They're all, how do you expect someone like, Bill Jordan and those guys at the time, just some random 20-year-old kid come up and saying, hey, want to sponsor a show, or whatever. And they're just like, and I think about it now, if somebody came and asked me, you'd be like, well, how do I know this guy isn't going to give me a black eye? If I go out there and all of a sudden the next day he's caught in some poaching ring or whatever, whatever it could be. He's like, they don't know you from Adam. So to somebody to put their, money and their faith in somebody, it's like, how do you get that, from them? But so it was nice that for the years, I had never asked anything from anyone. I hadn't even met a lot of them, but I would always push their products, the stuff that I liked in photos and stuff. So when I came to them, they're just like, yeah, this guy's been doing stuff for us for years and never asked for anything. I think, yeah. And so it was just a good lesson, I think, just a life lesson for anyone just starting out. And just like we were talking about earlier, it seems like so many people now, they want everything, but they don't want to give anything. I was the exact opposite. I'm still that way. I don't like asking for anything. I just rather go do it myself. And if somebody, I'll do more for people than they expect of me. And then I always feel I can sleep at night that way.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of people that just want, and with no results. I mean, without doing anything for somebody else. So my advice, I always given that just if somebody's paying you $20 an hour, give them $40 an hour worth of work, and you'll always move up the ladder. You'll always get where you want to go, and you'll always, like I would say, I can always sleep at night.
And I think that I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's some of the best advice that you could give. And the one thing we didn't talk about prior, I'm part owner of a company, a hunting product company in the industry, Timber Ninja, and we make mobile hunting equipment. And the amount of people that reach out about wanting, sponsorships or things, and it's like asking for, decent amount of money, and without really telling me what they're going to do. And
right.
And it was just like, I just know for myself when I was starting with this, and I'm newer to it than you were, but that's not how I went about it. It was more of like, once you had the results of, then that's when those, say Diamondbacks, you and I are talking here. Andy Campbell.
Yeah, I love Andy.
I love Andy too. And he introduced us, and Andy had come to me at the Harrisburg show. I was working the Maven Optics booth, and for 3 years in a row, wanting me to try a Diamondback on my truck. And I was like, I don't know, man, I'm all right. And we were going through it, and he's like, just the fact that he's like, you never asked me for anything. And you were just like, say, I really wanted to work with you because I've seen the things that you were doing. And it's just that mentality, I think, gets you so much further. Now Diamondback is an incredible partner of mine, and obviously of your guys too. And like, that's just an example of where, instead of always just, trying to take, it's like, what can you do to help someone else out? And it ends up coming back around.
For sure. Like, people just, I think today seems like younger people are try to put the cart before the horse on a lot of things. They want. But the thing is, if you go out there and work and kick ass, people will notice. Trust me. I mean, I see it all the time. And just even people that work for me, people that work, because we just built a house. You see all kinds of the workers that were here over 3 years and stuff. I can tell you within the first week, I'll tell you who the ass kicker is on every one of these places, and people will recognize that right away. It's not going to take you 10 years or anything. Trust me, you go work someplace for a couple months, people will notice. It doesn't take long. And so that's where I always lived my whole life. I give double what anybody expects, and then good things will come to you on that. You won't have to ask. Yeah. Is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Things will fall in your lap. Like, I always feel like everything is like, for me, it's like, I feel like everything is falling in our lap. It's like I was telling you earlier, it's like, I'd be like, pinch me. How did this happen? But I think a lot of things, obviously, if it's a goal that you have, like for hunting, and you just have that work ethic and you just love it and you keep going after it, people will see that. And although that's why all those pieces fell into place. It's like, you feel like they just fell out of the sky on us, but really in the long run, it was just the work ethic that we had, and just our just ethics in general, that you never ask them for things. I always do more for people than they expect, and all those things that if you're my age, your grandparents told you. But it all came. I think it happens. Like I said, it feels like it falls out of the sky for you, but I think people were watching and could see that passion and your work ethic and stuff long before I ever even thought about it.
Yeah. And when your head's down and you're working in it, you're not noticing those things, which is great to be able to see. And I think like hunting too is like, when I started Western hunting, that put a whole nother level of things for me, because I had a brand new thing. It was like elk hunting. I'd never done that before. I was trying to. It took me 4 years to kill a bull elk with my bow. And it was like 40 days total by the time you totaled it all up before it actually happened. But that, like, the amount of work that goes through and that delayed gratification, understanding that has helped me in so many other areas of my life, of like the consistency of doing those things over and over again for a long period of time. Eventually you look back and you're like, whoa, how did I get to this point?
Right. And that's, it's, and that's what we were talking earlier about, especially with social media stuff and all the negative people and stuff. And you just, it doesn't, like I said, it just rolls off like a duck's back. But you really feel sorry for him because just all the stuff that we're talking about. I guarantee you, I very rarely look at social media because I'm working. I don't have the time to, and I just figure if I sat and spent 2 hours, even an hour a day or 2 hours a day, saying, "Man, I got kids, I got this stuff. What could I have accomplished in that 2 hours that are better spent time?" So you think of people that are just on there every day, bad mouthing people and stuff like that. It's just like, number one, I mean, why would you spend the time to do that for someone that you've never even met before? I mean, if you're on there at all, you should use that time to be trying to learn something, and if you're not, then why are you even on there at all? So I almost feel sorry for him. It's like, well, you probably have kind of a miserable life, but if you're not getting where you want to go in life, it's because you're sitting on social media, living life and doing things. And I see that a lot. That's social media has been great, but it's sad a lot of times. Like we're buddies with Luke Bryan. He was playing in Vegas last year. So we took the kids for their birthday. Their birthdays were like 10 days apart. They were just a couple of days ago. Reagan's was. So like Cameron's is March 26th and Reagan's is April 6th. So they're like 10 whatever days apart. And had to plan it that way because it's like, well, we can still, new kids, we can go out and turkey hunt and stuff, but man, you got to have at least 6 months or something because big game hunting, it's like you're gonna have to be ready to go on this stuff. So we timed it up pretty good.
Yeah.
But we were there, and I'm just, it's so different. Like when we were like on spring break, like when I was in high school and college, you go down there. I mean, there were no cell phones, and you just went and you think of all the stories and the fun that we had. I mean, if we had phones, we'd be in prison probably. Yeah. The stuff that you got away with and did and stuff. But now you just see like kids just in the pool, like the girls would come down there just taking pictures of themselves for like 2 hours in the pool and then leave. And it's like you try to live a fake life on social media. Like, look how great time we're having. We're in Vegas. Look at the great time. It's like you literally did nothing. You didn't even talk. You didn't do a single thing, and you went back to your room. It's like you're trying to make a make-believe life, and you're missing out on the real life. And that's what I just think about, like the social media stuff. I use it, a lot, mostly for like learning stuff. If I'm changing, a belt or something on a Ranger, a new 1500 Ranger, it doesn't need a belt change, but how do I change the oil on the You're looking at stuff. I always look at it to learn stuff. And that's like I look at like hunting stuff to learn stuff too. But if you're just on there all day long to see who you can badmouth or think, I'm way better than this person. I don't think about if I'm a better hunter than somebody else. Like, why would it even cross your mind?
Yeah.
Just go on there and try to learn something.
That's to me, I think there's two ways of using it, is for a negative, and then there's I think social media is such a powerful tool.
For sure.
I talked about this recently, but like what time in the world could you have all of this information at your fingertips to be able to learn? Like when I'm doing anything with, whether it's business, hunting, podcast, whatever, I can search things on YouTube and find answers to it and learn how to do that. Or even just like working on my equipment at my house or something. It's like, I don't know how to do this. So I was like, I'll look it up and I can watch a video.
Yeah. When out of the time in the history of the earth have you had that opportunity?
No, like it's insane, and I think it's awesome. Or even like just the ability to be able to reach people and be able to, maybe you reach out and maybe you get a response, maybe you don't, but there's a chance you might get a response from somebody you would have never been able to talk to in minutes by reaching out and trying. And I think you can utilize those tools in such a positive way. Versus, I don't understand the idea of I know it comes down to jealousy or insecurities with a lot of it, but I can't understand it.
Yeah, and I just kind of feel sorry for him because, obviously we've all been there before. You feel jealousy, you see something on there, you're like, oh, gee, well, yeah, that's because they had this or whatever. I mean, everyone does. It's just human nature. But if I might find myself thinking that or something, but I was like, whoa, snap out of it, Lee. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would never even, it would never cross my mind to like write something negative to somebody. If I ever took the time to write something to somebody, it would be try to be positive and try to lift them up in some way or whatever. It's beyond me how you could go and just badmouth somebody that you've never met before. And that's just that's just the way I feel about everything.
Yeah.
You know, I would give a stranger the shirt off my back, and you ask anybody that knows me would tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like I just maybe overly generous on things, but it's just like, you know, like I said, if you can sleep at night.
Yeah. That's exactly.
Feel better
right.
about yourself. You know, it just makes you feel good to do that. I couldn't imagine it. Like, you know, you just look at any successful person. Have you ever seen, who do you think is successful in this world? I mean, whatever your idea of success is, but do you think, you know, the CEO of Sitka, Leupold, anyway, do you think that CEO sitting there badmouthing, well, your scope isn't this. No, nobody has time to do that. They're not going to do that. That's just not their nature. Anyone successful is not going to sit and try to put people down. They're going to want to try to lift people up.
What I've learned from getting to spend time around, say, people like yourself and others that like I look up to or like strive to work towards, it's just none of them think in that way. There's none of that's going on. It's like they're focused on working and becoming better and doing things.
Right.
And that's, and you know, when it comes down to like the deer hunting side of it, the level of detail and work that goes into it, the people that I've interviewed, well, hundreds at this point of successful hunters in different places, and they all have the same, like if I can boil it down to it, they are the work ethic. They don't quit, and they're detail oriented on things of like they have a system that they work and they go through on things, and I think that is like, I've been super lucky to grow up with a father that's absolutely obsessed with deer hunting and has been doing it forever and has been logging all of the weather data, and he has trail camera logs for 20 years of going through all these bucks, and every time he sat in a tree and all, like, so I've got to learn from that and to be able to see it. And it's like, that's why he's successful every single year in doing that. And like that level of detail and success like that, I love surrounding myself with people like that to be able to learn from.
And really what it takes to be successful, you have to do it a lot too. I mean, it's funny because like I said, everyone thinks that they're really a good hunter, and most people pretty much are. But you know, if you do it quite a bit. But like 30 years ago, I thought I was a great deer hunter, and I knew nothing there compared to what I do now. I mean, in the whole scope of things. But everybody kind of thinks that because you don't know what you don't know. So everybody thinks that they're good. But I see it a ton because we have a ton of people that come here and friends that, you know, I grew up with hunting, and you know that you know they were just nuts about hunting, just like me and everything. So, but they come in, you see how separated you are from them as far as what you know and how your ability to be successful. Because like most people don't have a chance to, like for us, we literally probably hunt 200 days a year, basically, in some way, shape, or form. But that's not reality for most people. They have like a couple weekends, you know, that they hunt. You know, if you're a gun hunter, like most states, it's a couple weeks long. You go out 2 times a year, something like that. And I see it like a lot of times with even like friends that are like country music singers, whatever. Their life is so busy, they're not spending 200 days hunting. Mm-hmm. But when they come out to hunt, you're just like, oh boy, here we go. You know, there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be misses and bad shots. But that's just fun because like most of those people, they just love the hunting part of it. But they get so excited. But if you don't get to go do it all the time, it's not like it's just going to be natural. You're just going to go out and man, you're going to make all the right moves, and you're going to grunt when you should. You're going to snort wheeze when at the right times, and you're going to do everything, and they come in. You're going to be textbook shots. It barely ever happens, you know. And you don't expect it because like I said, everybody thinks they're really good, but how much do you really get to do it? And how much do you really get to do it when you all of a sudden have a 180-inch deer coming underneath you? I mean, if you talk to all the people in the United States that deer hunt, that's pretty select group that even has had a 180 underneath them, you know. And how are you going to react to that? You know, how many people are just going to totally blow it because they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if I pulled my bow back, you know, and stuff like I was too. But like I said, it's such different levels on things. So you just tell people, get out and hunt as much as you possibly can, because I see it, you know, once you start having a hunt around a lot of people, and a lot of people coming here, a lot of friends that you consider were really good hunters, like when you're in high school together and stuff, and they still are probably for somebody who doesn't get to go that often. But it's funny, like with Tiffany, even, she'll think, well, I'm just, I just go and have a good time. I'm not as serious as like you is, but she still hunts, 200 days a year. Almost. She is unreal. I mean, compared to most people that I see come in, I mean, the mistakes that she won't make. I mean, she'll try to be lighthearted about it. She's terrible at directions. She probably couldn't find the tree stand. She's hunted 100 times. She'll be the first one to admit it. But she is, when you put her like on like a spot and stock stuff, deer stuff, she's a machine on the stuff. She's really good. But it's like, you see that compared to like friends that you grew up hunting with, they're really good. Oh, this is your wife. She's not good. I mean, Tiffany is so head and shoulders above so many people, but it's not because she's like this great hunter. It's because, hey, she does it 200 days a year. She's gone on hundreds of stalks. She's shot, antelope, mule deer, elk stuff at 80 yards, 70 yards. We shoot all the time. We have a archery range in our basement. We have them out here. We can shoot indoors, year round. At night, 2 a.m, we can go down and shoot and stuff. But you get those experiences, and that's what you learn from. You learn from those experiences, and that's why I always tell people, get out and do everything you possibly can, because it makes you a better hunter. So all the trolls out there, everyone thinks that they're, if I had your place, so that's like, just forget about that. Just try to get out and hunt and do as much stuff as you can. You'll find yourself a lot more enjoyable and a lot better at, and be a lot more successful when you do have that once in a lifetime chance pops up.
Man, I watch when I see you, say shooting one of these, giant deer or whatever it is, and I see them come out, I think of like myself of like trying to keep it together. I'm always, I've also talked to Levi Morgan about this, because both you and him, like, I think are just like, I'm like, do these guys screw up? Like, I look at them like, they just seem like ice in the veins when it comes to it. And obviously the amount of encounters and things have grown to, I'm sure that wasn't always the case for you.
Well,
or maybe
no,
it was.
It still feels the same too. It's funny because you still like, that's my camera guys. A lot of time they'll be like, just get some footage of them for a minute. But it's just like, because I'm like, you're hyperventilating, but it's like, okay, but I've learned over the years, don't just pick up your bow and think about shooting. Just be calm. Just breathe, get your breath again. Okay, now let that get past for a second, okay, and then kind of get control of it, and then start going through your mind these things. But that wasn't always that way. It was always, giant deer, grab the bow, shoot. And you're like, why did I think it was 50 yards? Why would I use my 50-yard pin? It was clearly right here at 20. What in the world? I mean, I've had all those experiences, just like everybody else has, but like I said, that is the point about when we get to hunt 200 days a year, that you remember that, okay, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
But even every year, I mean, that's why I just like antelope hunting so much, because, and like this year, a friend of mine, Brendan Burns from Cougar, asked me to go down to Texas and shoot axis deer and stuff like in May. And a couple of years ago, I went to Montana. I shot a bison like in July or something like that. But all those off-season hunts like that just gets you back into that mode. It kind of gets some of that, because even been doing this for so many years, like I do not want to go to my first hunt like on a mule deer hunt, where it could be a 200-inch mule deer, because you still make mistakes. You're like, what in the world? What? It takes you a bit to get back into that. That's why I like antelope hunting. You get a lot of encounters. And, I mean, let's face it. I mean, most of the time you get 150 yards and they're gone, so dang it. So you get a lot of stalks in without many shots and stuff. But it gets you into that, if it gets any kinks out, doing something in the summer and stuff, because even taking off 6 months and coming back to it, all of a sudden your first one is a 220-inch mule deer or something, and all of a sudden you make some mistake. Oh, why did I do that? Even after doing it for 30 years, you still do the same things. It's just like you can't get out and hunt enough, you still make mistakes, but like I said, over the years you kind of learn how to deal with like the buck fever stuff. You learn to deal with that, but you still do dumb stuff.
It's like, it's funny. So I still struggle with that. And last year it was like, all right, I went out west and I'd shot 2 elk, and I was confidence, through the roof. And I come back to Pennsylvania and have the number one deer that I was hunting, one of the biggest deer that I've hunted. I have him come in and just out of panic mode, he was running around, snort wheezing at this other buck, and I thought he was about to take off. And I had ranged the tree he was standing in front of 4 times that morning. Forgot the yardage, and not knowing, like, just being able to see the whole scenario. He wasn't going to go any further. There was a doe in this tree over here. He wasn't leaving her. Like, I had the opportunity. I could have just took another minute, or not a minute, but
a couple
took a
seconds.
few seconds to calm down and use the right pin, and I shot right underneath him, and I was just like, man, that's a tough lesson to be able to learn again.
You still do that.
And it's just like, man, like when those things happen, it's just like such a heartbreak. But like, again, just being able to make those mistakes and, obviously hopefully learn from them to be able to pull forward. But I was talking to a buddy recently about Pennsylvania has the red tags for does in some of the areas that have, in some of the farm country, it has high deer numbers. And I was like, we need to go down in the summer and shoot some does to get those reps in and get that feeling through, because that's that can definitely be a struggle.
It's antelope that opens like August 15th, and right before like the elk and mule deer and stuff like that. Try to get some of those kinks out right then and get some of the jitters out and all that stuff, because you don't want your first hunt being like a sheep hunt or something that now are so expensive. You got to mortgage your house to do it, and and making a mistake on something like that. But I mean, it's just to get out there and hunt as much as you possibly can. But for most people, they don't get a chance to. It's just the weekend, so here and there, and it's like it's tough because it's you might go years in between bucks even, and not necessarily even a good one. So also a good one walks underneath. You likely don't have the experience and have the opportunity to make some mistakes to learn from. So it's like things go south a lot. Is there people that don't get to hunt a lot?
Is there anything like in the summertime, like when you have a range here outside and you got one in the basement, you're talking as far as like with your shooting, would you say that's more of just the consistency side of it, of doing it every day and shooting, or are there any like particular things that help you when it comes down to that moment of truth?
Well, I think the biggest thing is like shooting long distances. I've said that for years. I mean, I hardly shoot. If you look at all the targets out here, we got like 20 to 40 in the basement in our archery range. Now here it starts at 40 and goes out to 100. And like the most shot out target you see there is the 100, because that's all I shoot really. But, like just to go and shoot like 20 is fine just for muscle memory if you have the correct form. But the thing is that you can shoot at 20 and miss by that much, and you don't know if that's you or whatever. You do that same shot at 100 and you miss by that much. Like, boy, that was terrible. So that's not what you want your muscle memory to be, or those shots. But so when you shoot at 100, just rep after rep after rep, like every shot, you have to think about it. And then once we get like into August and we don't shoot at spots anymore, then it's just animals. So I purposely put like the antelope target out there because it's small, and I'll put that like to 100 to 110. But it is a little bit easier because it's got the white part in there, and you can always have a good aiming spot at that point. So it's a little bit cheating on that, but it is a small target. So you have to think about, like, if you flinch one little bit, you're missing it. You're missing the target at 110, and you're like, dang it. So it makes like every shot you have to really think about. You have to look at your bubble, think about the torque, think about the wind. Okay, how am I going to do this? Okay, and every shot has to be perfect. But that's like through the whole summer of shooting at 100, at spots, you start seeing, what I did to a little mistake at 20, you're not going to notice it, and you're going to think it's good, and that might be your muscle memory, and that might be terrible. But so when you're shooting at 100 just consistently, now every shot has to be more methodical, and you have to think about it. It's not like you can just go and just mindlessly thinking something else and ripping 20-yard shots off, shooting them in the dot. That doesn't happen at 100. Everything's got to be right, so that's what your muscle memory gets, and it's not like shoot quick. I got this routine to do, and it's like an internal clock that goes. I almost know when it's going to go off, but it's still your thing. Okay, look, peep, is it centered this way? What kind of wind do I need to give a little bubble into the wind? Do I have enough wind to do that? Okay, and there's a couple things that go through your mind that take 3 to 4 seconds, and then you're squeezing and pulling, and so it's usually for me. It's likely probably like a 6 or 7 second
shot process.
To do it, and so you're not just shooting at something. Why'd I do that? And so you have that, that mental time that it really takes you to do everything, and so you're doing all those things. You're thinking about wind, and you're thinking about yardage, and you're thinking about all that stuff as he's coming in, and that's something I say I've gotten way better at. I mean, I think being like an engineering type mind and personality. I think like he's talking about Kenny out there. It's funny because I'd find a mule deer, and most people just go, but he'll tell you I'd sit there for 45 minutes trying to figure out a plan and maps. And this because you just go, I'm going over there. Okay, yep, okay, I got him. Go over. You get over the other side of the hill to get downwind. It's totally different. Like, this doesn't look anything like it. Where the heck is it?
Yep.
So it's all those things, that planning and stuff. So you learn that. But then also when I do find, okay, now I'm sitting there, I'll think of everything, every single scenario. What if he goes out this way? What if he goes this way? What if he goes this way? Do I need to move this way? Okay, and I never get in. I don't want to get hardly more than maybe 50 is as close as I'll go. Like 60 is about where I'd like to be, because it's just like, when they stand up, a lot of times they can see it, because a lot of times we have a camera guy and he's got a big tripod sitting behind you. It's not like they stand up and don't notice you. I mean, because normally if you're looking at their horns, you see any of their horns, when they stand up, you're going to be in the open too. So you get to 20 yards and they'll stand up and it's like, whoa, what's that? And they'll run, and most of the time they'll stop. You can get them to stop too. We've done that plenty of times, stop them and then have that, give you that second to shoot. But I find like at 60 yards is about the point where a lot of times they'll stand and they'll look and they'll go, what's that? And they'll give you that time where you're not, you can still do it if you do happen to bust them. Like if you get in too tight and they run, you can usually, and they'll stop. They'll give that second, but now you got range to do everything else. And, so what you want is if you've been sitting on for 3 hours, I want to know the exact yard. Okay, it's 62 yards, not 60, not 63, it's 62 yards. And then, okay, when he stands up, you always know they're going to stand up, see their head moving, draw at that point, be ready. And then they stand up, they might go, whoa. And they'll give you that couple seconds to shoot. And then always, it's like most of the time, like on mule deer and stuff, you're not going to see their vitals. And then I can't tell you how many people are like, I couldn't see their vitals. And so you don't have to. That's why I got 60 yards. It's dropping almost 2 feet. So you look at, unless it's like sage or tree brush, so that can deflect. But most of the time, like we hunt in grass or stuff like that, and you're going over the top of it. And it's good. We're talking about Jeff. When Jeff and I, we went caribou hunting last year, I was telling them that. It's like a lot of this time in this caribou stuff, even, where it's taller stuff, you're not always going to see their vitals. We were just talking about that. We were talking about mule deer hunting and stuff too. And I said, I can only think of maybe, I've shot a lot of mule deer, and I can probably only think of 2 to 3 maybe that I could even see their vitals, because most of the time they spot stalking and they're in grass and they're in, tall, even in sagebrush stuff or whatever. And that's why I like to be at 60, because then you got some arc to go over the top of that stuff and send it in there. So we were talking about that, and it just happened that, so he was stuck on the one and got up and it ran, because we got too close, like we were saying, it ran and it stopped, and I was ranging for him. I was like, okay, it's 70-some. He shot and he just smoked it, and he's like, all I could see is his back line, but it's like, that's all you need to see. Where their vitals are.
Yep.
And so at 70 yards, you arc it right in. He goes, I would have never taken that shot if you and I weren't just talking about that yesterday. We were just talking about that. And he's like, I wouldn't have shot that caribou. I wouldn't have gotten the shot. So we practice that all the time out here with Tiffany, because she has a hard time with that too, because like the mental part, not seeing it, she just hesitates and hasn't done it. So we have like a little hill in our yard here, so I'll take that, like a block target and put it there where you just see like an inch of the top lip of the thing, and you got it. So I was like, where the center is on it, right?
Yeah, it's weird because
where it is. Aiming at the dirt, aiming at the clover field. So, but you see that at 60 yards that you sail it in there and get used to doing that, and that's something I even did a YouTube piece on it, and I don't know how many people will listen to it and stuff, but I see it all the time, and you can ask like the people out west, and they're like, most people are not successful on it, because a lot of that is that they don't say, I couldn't see the vitals. Well, maybe you got in too tight and then you're not going to. But we did it like that. that buck right there, a minor, that wide one out with Kenny, that was like a buck that they've been trying. That they was like 8 years old. They've been trying to shoot him for years, and Tom was like, "You'll never get him. We can't even get him with a rifle." I said, "Oh yeah, that's the perfect deer then." It took like one day on that deer to shoot him, but like he'd stay in all that oak brush. You could see him from the other side. You'd go over there, and the oak brush is too tall. So we got in like 30 yards like 6 times that day on that deer, and we got in there, and I just like. If he stands up, you're not going to get a shot. You're not even going to see his back line because it was all that oak brush.
Yep.
So we'd back out, let him go around, let him get up again. And we did that all day. And I think we got in like 30 yards of him like 5 times. And it's like, no, we're not going to get the shot, back out. And there was 3 of us too because we had 2 camera guys with. So then finally it was starting getting late. I was like, okay, now he was just getting up and feeding, at the normal stuff and then laying back down or poop and pee and stand up and turn around. But I was like, okay, now he's getting towards evening. There was a pond on the other ditch. And I said, he's going to have to go over the top. I would assume he's going to go over towards to the water hole, because early season like that in Velvet, it's hot and they hadn't drank all day. They're going to go there. So then finally we just kind of kept side-tailing them down. We would even go around and find him again. Okay, go back. And so it was just like, okay, that time, so we just let him. And then he came up over the top where you could see him, and then I shot him on the top. But yeah, he was a smart one. But the thing is, some people just try to get in, they try to push it, try to make it happen on them. If it's not going to happen, back out and get out of there. Just do not bump them.
Interesting, because it's funny. I obviously I didn't see the YouTube video because I haven't heard that explained in that way to me before, of like that, of having that, being at that distance where you have that arc, and even like practicing that, it messes with me. Shooting a bunch of TAC events, I was starting to get to learn doing that. I was shooting in, I think it was in Montana, and John Dudley was there. He was shooting the course with us, and he was explaining some of that shooting, and even just like with branches and things, of the mind, how it just messes with your mind on it. And it's like, I've learned I need to practice that. And even just knowing in the woods, of learning the arc of your arrow, even if you are at closer distances, to be able to,
for sure,
to be able to understand
knowing.
that.
And it's like now Loophole has like on their, they have that archery rangefinder, and it gives you the stick up, so it shows you how you put in the speed of your bow and all that stuff. It works with Archer's Advantage, and then it has like your dot that you do, but then it puts a stick up straight up, and it'll show you where the top of your arc is at that distance, so you can see if there's a branch there or something. You'll see that it's, oh heck, I got to get down. You can see where the top of it is. But that obviously they just came out with that last year, which helped immensely. But for us, for me, just so many years of using Archer's Advantage for over 20 years now, like since Perry started Archer's Advantage. I just pay so much attention to the arc and stuff. So I, trying to get the most speed I can for those long distance shots, and just seeing how much arc and knowing how much arc, and it's a lot. Yeah. So you're looking at, you get up to 80 and 100 yards. I mean, it's over 6-8 feet, or depending on different bows, but it can be 12 feet and stuff. So you got to know, okay, what's above as well. And I've had some of those where he didn't shoot. It's like, it was in the timber. It's like, you're not going to make that.
Yep.
At that, but people like they think 60 yards is a long shot, but it's like that's where my comfort zone is. I feel 100% confident at 100 yards on deer, let alone 60. So 60 is not a long shot. In my mind, it's like I'll make that shot every time. But you have that enough arc, and you have enough that you're not so close that they are startled. It'd be like somebody walking up behind you, like, whoa, geez, what's that?
Yep.
But somebody's across the room, you're not startled at it. They're like, hey, what's that? And they'll give you that look. So, they're just things that, like I said, there's just so many things that you learn over the years. I'm sure that's what Kenny was talking about, because we're very methodical about it. And we go there, and deer that people have been trying for years and can't get, we go in one stock, boom, knock them out.
Oh, that's awesome. And the thing about the spooking them and reading that the body language there is like, I always think about that when I go in the woods and I end up blowing a buck out, I can tell one by like how far away he bumped, versus if I almost step on him, that deer's probably not coming back for a little while. But if he's out, good 80, 90, 100 yards, his bedding spot worked, and a lot of times he comes right back into there because it worked, versus you really spook him. It's like,
right.
It's a whole other
you got to
level.
think about it. I mean, deer, when you watch them enough, you see how many things spook them. mean, a turkey coming through a spook, a turkey flying up in a tree. I say, you hear that every single day of your life, and you still get spooked by it. You know, they get spooked by a million things every day. And so it's not that unusual for you to bump a deer. You know, of course you don't want to, but I guarantee it, they were bumped 10 times that day by other things too. So it's not like the end of the world. I don't think it's over. Like I said, it's worse if you're really stalking and you about to step on them.
Yeah.
Then that's a different kind of scared. And I talk about that all the time too. It's like on elk stuff, because like I hunt elk like deer. You know, it's like you've got one particular bull you're looking for. It's fun, like going out to, like when we go out to Utah, like you said, you're hunting with Tom and Kenny and them. There's just so many, and so you can call, and they're screaming back at you, and they're coming in. But most of the ones that you're getting to come in are the satellites. You know, the big ones, the old ones that have the cows are not coming to a call. They already have them. Most of the time they're moving them away from you. So that, you know, now that I hunt them like the same way, like for deer, you know, you're looking at them. I'm looking at the one I shot this last year. This was the 4th year we've been watching them and stuff. And so you're just trying to spot them in the morning, and then you got all day to make a move on them. If you spot them at night, it's like, because they can, you know, every night for elk is different. You know, it's like taking that Etch-a-Sketch and shaking that, worked on a masterpiece all day and shake it up at night, because they could be 20 miles away in the morning, you know.
Yep.
You just don't know. So that's why it's so exciting when you find them in the morning. Okay, I got all day to work this thing, you know, to get in on those things. And, you know, it's you know, just, so we hunt them the same way as deer. You know, you're just trying to get in on them, and you know, just the things that we learned from the mule deer side and stuff that I've learned recently on the elk side too, what you can get away with and ways to get them. Because like the big one I shot this year, I would have never even tried it like a week before. Mm-hmm. And then to do it just for how many things you've learned, even like now that you're learning all the time. But like now it's like you're basically hunting that one elk, trying to spot him and just try to get him in his bed and try to get close. So it's just like mule deer hunting. And that's why I just really have learned to love elk hunting too, because I've always said, if anybody asked me in the last 20 years, if I say like mule deer hunting is my favorite, because it's like that chess match.
Yeah.
And where elk hunting in some of the places, like the way I hunted originally, it was more like a bull in a china shop. You know, you're calling somebody and they come running in. You don't know which angle, or if they're going to come in and give you a shot, and if it was moving fast, and you're not like I'm more methodical on things. But now when you start looking for that one bull, now it's kind of that's why I just love it so much now, because it's, hey, I'm looking for one bull, and that's the only one I'm going to shoot this year. And, you know, trying to get in on the thing with, you know, 40 to 60 cows and 3 satellite bulls and everything else, and just crawling in on that thing with all those eyes around and still making that shot. It's just the challenge. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, and that open country stuff with elk hunting is, and I haven't spent a lot of time mule deer hunting. I've really only did like one full mule deer hunt because I've been so focused on elk and trying to get better at it. But everyone I talk to is like, the way you even have learned to hunt elk and everything, that you're gonna love mule deer hunting. And like last year when I was telling you beforehand, hunting in some open country in Montana, spotting, stalking bulls, it was so just in the 10 days I was there, how much I learned of like when to put a stalk on. So you're looking, and I'd find a bull, he's bedded, he's got cows all around him. And it was like, okay, well, all right, we got to wait until these thermals kind of settle down and switch so they're consistent. They're blowing up so we can come in over from the back. Then it was like, oh, it's too windy. And I'm like, I don't want my arrow to, you know, if I can't get in, the arrow to go. Then I realized that wind helped you get closer and be able to get in. So there's all these little things, and just
things put together.
Yeah, just like all those little things of putting together, and then, you know, you just learn so much from those experiences, and it definitely helps of like being able to have those reps and be able to do so. You know, if I had one stalk on a bull all in that 10 days, that would have been, you know, wouldn't have learned as much. So that definitely helped. But getting to hunt, you know, in Utah at a special place like that, before that helped me too with seeing how elk react, how they respond, what you can get away with, what you can't, and all those different things. And just being around elk a bunch had helped me on that next hunt for sure.
Right. Like when I first started elk hunting, like I think, and this should be like most people probably this should be this way if they're not. I mean, just hearing that and bugle and stuff, and calling at them, and how you get a guide or somewhere or a buddy calling from 100 yards back and get them. It's almost like turkey hunting. Like I said, you can video a turkey hunt and hear them gobble on video, but it's never the same as when they're right there, and it feels like when you're a kid at a parade with a bass drum, boom, how you just feel it go through your whole body, and you never will feel that just watching a turkey hunt. That's what I tell people. You got to go and experience it, but it's the same thing with elk. You can hear them bugle, on TV all the time, but there's nothing like you're sitting in your call and you see an elk, that big thing come through and just coming like 15 yards in front of you and stop it. I'll blow your hat off with a bugle and say, oh my God, there's nothing like it. And so you got to go through all that stuff and get that out. Like, okay, so like for me, after I've shot a bunch that way and stuff, it was so much fun. But then you get just like whitetails. It's like, okay, now I don't want to just, I respect all these animals so much. And it's like, I just don't want to kill one to kill one. It's like, so I don't want to go and shoot a bunch. I mean, if I shot one a year, great with that, and because we got plenty of meat, I don't want to kill one just to cut the horns off and throw it on a wood pile. If I shoot something, I want to be something I put on my wall or something that I'm super proud of and stuff. And of course, I was always proud of all those because it was just such an accomplishment. Okay, now I figure, okay, I've done all that. We've got all that, same as deer. Everyone's got to start somewhere. You got to start. I mean, I shot first, and you were just as pumped as you were. Probably more excited, definitely more excited than when I shot my first 200, because so you want to experience all those things, but you just part of human nature is, okay, you feel like you've mastered that, move on. It's just like people are like, well, you're just a horn hunter. Well, I'm not. It's like, how much fun would Gretzky have going playing at the Pee Wee team in his prime? This isn't much of a challenge, but for me, shooting a young buck wasn't much of a challenge for me anymore. I mean, I could do that anytime I want. So it's more about the challenge for you personally. So people, like I said, oh, you're hunting horns. It's like, no, I'm hunting for a challenge of it, just like you are. And, for me to shoot a 200, and I would never take that away from you because I understand it. It's like if someone in Pennsylvania shooting a deer like this, maybe it's just as hard for them as it would be for me to find a 200 someplace. So I'm not taking anything away from it. It's like, don't concentrate on the size of a deer, the size of the rack, something like that. It's the challenge for you personally is what drives us all. So don't think like, oh, he just, if I could have this 200, it's not any different than you trying to find that spike deer, because I was there too. I mean, hunting in northern Minnesota, like we talked at the beginning, just seeing a buck was like the point where I about hyperventilate and faint and fall out of the tree. But so like for me to get that, again, it's like a drug addict. You never you're trying to chase that first high that you have from your deer hunt. So now it takes something now instead of never done drugs, never would. It's like, okay, but I can imagine that's what it's like. Now I need to try to find a 200 to get that same feeling. So it's not any different than somebody shooting their first deer or whatever. So don't try to compare it that way. It's not like, hey, I'm better than you or a better hunter than you, or I have a better place than you. We're all trying to do the same thing. And it's like, it's not any different. So don't just take the deer and the rack and stuff out of it. It's just, what's the challenge for you? And we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, and that challenge is what drives us to be able to go, because like if things were too easy, we wouldn't do it for very long,
exactly.
or want to do it for very long. That's exactly right. So it's like if you were, here on some of your farms, you're putting in all this work, you're doing all this stuff, and a 2-year-old's coming out. It's like that's not going to give you that excitement.
Yeah, I've done that already.
You've done that.
It's like Gretzky. I was a peewee. I played Bantams back then. Okay, I moved past that to something else, and because you're getting better at it, but it's still the experience. You want the experience to have of that challenge, that stuff. Like, and now I think like this year really moved again. I mean, I had probably 5 deer this year that were like in the 180s to 190s. I didn't shoot any one of them. I looked at every one of them, had every one of them, like most of them are like at 10 yards and 20 yards. I was like, no, I'm not shooting any one of those because I want to shoot a 220 or a 230 or something. But all the deer that have the potential to do that are so rare. Like we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
1 in a million. It's not 1 in a million, but it's 1 in hundreds and hundreds of bucks that has the potential to do that. And so the fact that these were like 5 and 1 6-year-old deer were already close, those are the ones that have the potential to do it. So if you're going to shoot them there, I mean, even 5 years ago, I would have shot 3 180s or like a 190 and 2 180s, and it would have been like the best year of my life.
Yeah.
But it's even that, it's like, okay, work past that now. That's not. I got lots of those kind, but I have like 6 200s, but I don't have a 230, and so it's like, okay, well, maybe I can get one of that. I'm not going to do it if I shoot him at 190.
Yep.
But and Skip Sly was a good example of that for me, because Skip,
Yep.
He's been a good friend of mine for years. But he had a buck that was like at 5 years old, and it was like 206 or 202 or something like that, and he didn't shoot it because it's 5 years old, and it's I think he has more to go. And then so at 6 years old, it went backward. I remember showing that to me, but he was still big, like 180 to 190. But he just left him again. He's like, I know he can. He was already 200, so as long as he's shooting him now, and that's the one he shot this year. Like at 7, it's like 230. But so it's like seeing that, it's like you can't shoot a 230 if you shoot him at 202, and just so few deer can do that. And again, like I said, I don't want people are, the deer snob, you can't shoot a 200. It's not that. It's no different than them trying to shoot the first 10 point when they've only shot a spike or something. It's like you need that challenge of, I want it harder, because I don't even want to kill a deer really so much. I mean, I love these deer. I love watching them. I like seeing them. I have so much respect for them. I've said that a million times. And, for anyone to think that you're going to poach it or something, it's like, that is the last thing that I think somebody gets to this part, it would be like, that would be absolutely, it'd be like hitting them with the car to me. It'd be such a disappointment, like, crap. It's like, you want that challenge to find a big one, to try to get one to live that long enough, and then to try to hunt them, and not with the gun and with the bow. I'm trying to do everything as hard as possible, because you want the biggest challenge you can have, So
I'll give you an example of like on a different scale of it. So when I was talking about elk hunting for myself this year in Montana, I was challenging myself, because before it was like, elk hunting was like, I want to shoot a bull. Like that's what it was shooting a bull. And then after shooting a few bulls, it was like this year in Montana, I was like, the first day I stalked in on a bull, I was like, it wasn't really, I get in on him, then I get a full draw, and he was a young 6-point, and I didn't shoot. And I was like, what? I went through like an emotional point there of like, what am I doing? Well, who do I think I am? I'm like, this, I had killed for this opportunity. And, it took me all the way till day 10 before I ended up killing a bigger 6-point that was like, an older age.
You go home with nothing too.
Yeah. And sometimes you go home with nothing, but it was an older age. And that was like, it really just sunk in at that point. It's like, okay, and I got to experience 10 full days of hunting elk and all that learning, all that experience that comes through it. When it comes to deer, of like when you set those goals, sometimes you may get it done on that opening day. You do your homework and it gets into it, but a lot of times that takes you a good part of the season to go through that.
Right. Because I look at it, this year I shot a 9-point that was like maybe like just right at 170, but it was kind of like a management deer. It was like an 8-point last year, and then she put up a 9, that cool crown and stuff, and he was like a 6 or 7-year-old buck, so that was awesome. And then our Illinois farm tried a big old one that's been there forever, but just big spread. But he's not 100, maybe 150 inches. Mm-hmm. But so people might say, "Oh man, you didn't have a good year." And I shot, and I was like, "No, I really had probably one of my better years ever, because I had 5 different bucks that were like 180 to 190." And almost every one of them 20 yards and in. I had all of them right there. And just like to witness that, to see them, that was the most spectacular thing, because how often do you get to see one like that? And I saw all 5 of them. We looked at them. And it's like it's like a catch and release that you don't normally get to do with deer. And they're, of course, there's only 3 of them left alive. 2 of them died. And, EHD just seems to be, taking deer like in November and December and stuff, like where it used to always be in September, right in velvet or out of velvet. And you thought, when you got past that, the ones that were alive into October, you thought, after the first freeze and stuff, you thought, okay, they're safe. But that's not the way EHD, this strain, is working now. Most of the deer are dying like November, December, January, February. They're shedding and dying and stuff, so it's risky to even to pass them, not that I wouldn't be happy with these deer. If they were 7, I'd be totally happy with them. I figure, that's as big as they're going to get, 7 or 8. But the fact that none of them were that old, they're, 5 and one of them was 6. But, we found 2 of them dead, and they just died of EHD. So you're like, maybe I should have shot him. It's like, no, you can't think that way. I mean, you can't, then they're dead for sure, but I got 3 of them that are still alive. So I have 3 of them that I look forward to. So it gives me something to be excited about this year, thinking, and they might do nothing. They might go backward. They might not even show up, but they may blow to a 220. You don't know. So that's just,
It's funny. That was, you talked about it on your own without me asking it, but that was something that when I was talking to Thomas, he was like, I want you to ask Lee about passing on, the 180, 190 inch deer and like what it, that takes. And like, that's when you have some serious goals and being disciplined to a whole nother level of being able to do that. But
yeah, it just shows you, like we were saying, I mean, like it was just for most of like my hunting career. I mean, you started at 9 until I was almost 30. You think that's, you're talking 20 some years of trying to shoot a buck.
Yeah.
And so you're shooting the first one. I mean, I didn't shoot my first buck with a bow until I was like 20s, and it was a little spiky,
Yeah.
And so it's not like I was born with a silver deer hunting spoon in my mouth. I mean, I was probably like a lot of you guys' ages that people are now that are saying, I got a 150 there. It's like 150. When I was 20, I would have died to even see a 150,
Yeah.
It wasn't until, 25 probably till I even shot maybe my first Pope and Young type deer with the bow. So I spent a lot of years just trying to shoot a deer.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the bow, and then a lot of years trying to shoot a first buck with the bow. But okay, once you do that, okay, now I want to keep moving on. I want to keep, finding something more challenging and something bigger and something harder to find and harder to, so that's just, it's just like, I never thought I'd be passing 190 inch deer. Even 5 years ago, I would have never thought that. Even 2 years ago, I would have never thought that. But I think something about, talking with Skip and seeing that deer did that this year, and, you look around, it's just like, you're never going to get that if you don't let them go, because it used to be different before EHD years. Like the first years that I lived here, from 2000, when I first started hunting here, till 2010, we had a lot of years. EHD was something that happened in the Milk River or in Montana places. It wasn't, never had them here. And we first started buying farms here and, put in food plots stuff. We had, you would never lose a buck. I mean, I always tell people, like, I think maybe like in 2010, I think we were counting up like how many bucks that we had, like were over 5 years old, and it was like over 50. And at that time, it was like you couldn't get enough friends to draw, to get rid of them. I mean, there was big bucks that you let go because, hey, they didn't. It's not that they weren't on our hit list. We just killed 2 other ones first, and they just made it through by default. But nothing was done. I mean, you never lost them. I mean, you might occasionally find one dead from fighting or locked together or something. But, basically, they were there till 10 or until you shot them before. But then the EHD started, and I tell people, like I said, we probably had like 50 bucks over 5 years old. And by the time we got to 2015, we had like less than 5. And then it's been a struggle since then. So it's gotten better. You had to go a couple of wet years and, string 3 or 4 together. And also, but that was, after that 2015, all the deer numbers went way down. I always say, like, after those EHD years is when you get your big ones. And so in like those 5 years after that, we didn't really have any. I shot 6 200s. Every 200 I have was right after that bad EHD, and that's when you start getting some boom, that blowing up. Then you get a couple of years of it again and knock them back down again. And then, Okay, then we went a couple of years again without any, and like Tiffany shot her first 200 this year, and so it's like boom. But then they said hammering it down again. So there's not as many opportunities as it was. I mean,
Yeah.
I always said like the good old days are right now, but it's not anymore with the HD. I mean, it's the good old days were 2010 and prior, because there's just so many that you lose. I mean, it's hard enough to get, a buck has the potential to go to 200, and then 50 to 70% of them die of VHD. I mean, you just can't get them to 8. They just don't make it through that many years anymore. I'll show you pictures of the one that I haven't even gone and looked at him, Steven from Shit Hunting, but he's just giant frame, big flyers backward. He just did a great jump from last year. And on one of my farms, I hardly ever lose them to neighbors. Then we got great neighbors and everything there. And it's just like that. It's so 100% certain, okay, that one's going to make it through. We never lose them on that farm. He was gone, and it was like end of November. Knew he was dead. I thought maybe a neighbor shot him, but then it's usually not the case. Normally I would hear about it if somebody did or whatever, and you just kind of figure it's the HD. So, it's changed it a lot. It's not like it was.
Yeah. And so Lee, I do want to be respectful of your time, but I have one more thing that I wanted to ask you here. So, as you're going here, I'm starting to notice you're involving, you've always been involving Reagan and Cameron, but as they're getting older, what is that like transitioning to try to get them into hunting? And you mentioned a little bit earlier about of the struggle of you having, these magnificent places of how to get them to want to be involved in it.
Yeah, and it's true, because they really love it. And like Cameron, we're going to go try, just a couple of days from now, we're going to try to shoot his first turkey with a vertical bow. He shoots really good and stuff. But I think, like I said, that's like a struggle. I think I was so infatuated with deer because there weren't any. But these guys see them all the time, so you want to be like, okay, how do I do this? Because you never want to force anything on anybody, so I just let them do it. But both of them have parts of Tiffany's personality and parts of mine, but both of them are very stubborn like me, and they have that part to them. So I think that the thing that's going to really get them involved a ton, I think that they'll have a love for it like we do, is to give them those challenges, like with the bow. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you never want to make it too easy. Like I'll let them shoot. Like Cameron doesn't want to shoot one with the muzzleloader already, because he thinks that, with a gun, you can shoot him far, and it might be easier for him. Maybe he just heard me say that, And so he wants to shoot him like with a crossbow, because he can't shoot him. He can't pull enough weight. But so now, like with turkeys, he's super pumped about shooting with his bow, because he shoots really good. Just shooting all 4 of them, like 4 arrows at a time, every one of them almost in the dot. He shoots really good. And so I'm just like, okay, you can shoot 30 pounds. I just, you kind of wonder, is that enough to go through a turkey? If they hit them right, right above the legs, not in the wing butt, it should just smoke right through, and you should drop it right there. So I think that's the way to do it. And I was just like, okay, when they get a little bit older, I'm not gonna do it for them, and it'd be nice even if they went we had lots of public around here. Hey, why don't you buddies go out and try to shoot one? Yeah, you go do it yourself. But even if it's here, any place. It's like, no, I'm not helping you. You go put this in. You tell me, Yeah. And they're going to ask me, well, where do you think? I want to shoot this buck. Where do you think we should go? Because right now, he has the buck, that Titanic that he wanted to shoot he hunted it for like 3 years, and finally shot him this year. But of course, I take him out and I set the stuff up, and I said, but I think when they get a little bit older, and it's like, well, no, you tell me. I'm not telling you. You tell me where you're going to put that. Yeah. I'll help you put the stand up if you want, but you pick a spot. And I think when you start challenging them to that, and I think it'll be even when they get like their buddies, and they want to go out and hunt, and say, hey, you guys just go ahead and do it. I think that they'll start seeing that it's not as easy as you think. Because people even be like, if I could hunt on your farm, it's like, no, trust me, even places where there's a lot of big bucks, there's not very many. Yeah. And they're not any easier than anywhere else. Sometimes harder here, because there's probably very few farms around that are maybe managed like ours are. But there's probably very few that get hunted as much as ours do. We hunt every single day, and we have somebody hunting every single day on one of our farms. And there isn't a neighboring farm that gets hunted that much. Yeah, that much pressure. So, it's not like easy. Even people that come and bow hunt and stuff here, it's probably about 50% success rate.
Really?
People wait, years to come and stuff, and about 50%. So it is,
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, if you want to shoot a good one, and if, like most people, they think, okay, I got, especially like, people that are really busy, like Luke, he shot a couple of really, really good ones here, Luke Bryan, but he came like in muzzleloader season, because that's when he had the time. And like Brantley, and Brantley's a really close friend of mine, but they just have so little time. And he's like, if you're going to come and try to shoot one with a bow, you just got to take the first management deer that comes or whatever, because even in the best places, that might have some big deer. If you think you're just going to go out in 2 days and kill them, it's likely not. It could, but it's likely not going to.
Yeah.
So, like I said, people might think it's easy, but it's not, because like I said, our farms are more pressured than in any of the neighboring farms.
That's a good point. I wouldn't have thought of that, but with between you guys and then all the people that you have coming in here and everything, that's constantly constantly getting hit
all the time. And we hunt every day.
Yeah.
How many people? Most places they even get somebody comes out on the weekends. They have all week with nobody there. But that's where we're very careful, and that's why we have several farms we can rotate around. But when I'm on a big one, I'm not going to a different farm. I'm on that one every single day.
Yeah.
So that's where you learn stuff too about how you can get in and out, and how to set up stands for them, and how to hunt them and things but we hunt them every day, basically.
Yeah. Okay, I lied. I do have one last thing.
Yeah, we can take as time as you want.
Well, all right. So you were talking about hunting every day and stuff, but if there was one weather condition that would make, like, if you could have that every day to be able to hunt, what would that be?
Well, you maybe wouldn't want it because you'd be done in the first 3 days. But it's just when you ever got any basically a change of weather, it can be from rainy to sunny, which is the best, but it could be from sunny to rainy. It's kind of any change in a weather system, but it's always like that buck right there. I predicted, just looking at the moon phases and stuff, like in July, I'll shoot him on October 3rd. And people are like, oh, sure, he's calling out, what day you're going to shoot him at. But it just so happened that October 3rd, it had this cold front coming, and on the 3rd was an east wind. I couldn't hunt that because that's where he bedded instead of blow right in there. But then it was it was a couple of days off. So like by the 5th, you could see this cold front coming. And like the day that I hunted him, when it finally went to the north, it was still warm. And you could see, okay, a bunch of deer came out, but not him. And I didn't think he would. But then it was like on the 5th, I think, it was starting, that cold front was coming, but it was really windy. And so more deer came out, a couple of smaller bucks, but not him. I didn't think he would. But I was like, okay, on the 6th, that's the day that he's going to come out, because the wind finally dies, cold front is here, and bluebird day, high pressure, low humidity day, boom, like third deer out and shot him. But so it's like, you don't know that what the weather front's going to be in July, but I said, okay, this is when the moon phase is, and we're going to get, in that first 10 days, normally I always get at least the wind and get a little bit of change. In October, you might get a little cool front here and there, and just looking at the moon phase, I figured that would be by the 3rd, but just the wind was wrong for a couple of days, so it was like the 6th or something like that.
That's awesome.
But it's always that way. If you get a cold front in the first 10 days of the season, and that's why I like to shoot them. If I have a real big one, it's not the rut. Rut's the worst time. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to come and hunt the rut, so you can have it. I'll go hunt something else during that time, because it just pisses me off that time, because that's the time you lose. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know if they're alive still and everything else. It's like this first 10 days. So it's akin to, if you're coming here, do some homework this summer, take the first week off, the first 10 days, they'll still be basically similar to their feeding patterns of the summer, and you'll know they're alive at least, because at least I know they're bedding here, they're feeding here. I got cameras. I know, okay, it might not be every day, but it might be every day. You don't have a camera everywhere. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, he still could be coming to that field, just didn't get a picture of him. But at least I know that they're just going to bed and they're coming down here. And as soon as I get that first weather front, if I'm going to get a high pressure, cool front, he's going to be out in daylight. You start getting towards Halloween, I have no idea where he is until back in December again. And it's like, am I not seeing him because he's dead? Is he 30 miles away? They're never safe during that year. But you have almost the entire month of October to think somebody else isn't killing him. If I did all the work that I need to all summer, and I have the right food sources and I know where he lives. I made his bedding area perfect for him. I made food and water available and everything. I made it easy for him. They're not going to go anywhere else. And so I feel really confident that they're always alive until you get to like Halloween, and then you have no idea if they're alive. Mm-hmm. And then there's, just it's all out the window, and I don't feel that they're safe. You're always worrying about them. So I don't like that time of year because they'll disappear, with the doe for 2 weeks, and are they dead? Or 2 weeks? And then they'll show up, whoa. Okay, you might see them for a day or two, and then they're gone again. But okay, are they dead? And you never know. So it's just like, it's a frustrating time because especially if you're trying to kill them when they're locked down. It's like,
yeah,
you might as well just sit in and watch Oprah and watch your camera when he shows back up. He's in between, go back out again because you're likely not going to find them. I mean, sometimes you get lucky that you just happen to be getting the timber right where they happen to be bedded. And I've done that several times too, because it's funny how much they don't move. It was like 5 or 6 days in a row on this Big 10 on actually my buddy Joel's farm now. I sold it to him. But he was there, same spot for I can remember it was 5 to 7 days. I never got a shot at this stinking thing either. But he stayed, they basically didn't move 100 yards. I'd be in there all day. As soon as I get up, we'd get in the tree stand in the morning. It's like, man, it can't be 4 days in a row you're going to see him. Boom, oh, there he is. Yeah, same doe sitting there. They get up, they feed around, he'd breed her. They never moved outside of this room, like in an entire day. And it'd get dark, he sat there all day. Oh, and now they're not going to be in there in the morning. So we'd go kind of the wind, like it was maybe only like a 30-acre piece of woods right there, but then we had stands on both sides for either wind, so we'd go to the other side. We ain't never going to see him. Sure enough, there he is. Maybe it might be 50, 100 yards from where we saw him the day before, all day long. But once you start seeing that, you just realize why you don't get pictures of them. Then you don't see them, during the rut.
Yeah.
Because it's literally 100 yards from a big cornfield. We had cut corn and alfalfa and clover, turnip, everything. They never left the woods. They just browse around, eat some acorns, and lay back down again and breed her. And they'd stand around. And he'd stand there and stare at her and snort wheeze at her. And she'd run a little circle and they'd stop and then they lay back down. They barely went anywhere. It's frustrating, but that's why you don't get pictures of them. That's what they're doing. I mean, so it's really hard to hunt them if you have no idea where they are. I just happened to get lucky. Just found where that one was, and they didn't move 100 yards in that week. So, that's crazy. And like when you see a buck locked down with a doe, do you typically have kind of like a window like that? I mean, that seems like an extended time period, or is that kind of? It's usually 10 days that they're gone a lot of times, and it can be even longer because the older bucks you get, they don't. They might not even be 100% done with this one, but another one comes in, they see another buck chasing a doe that's just coming in. Well, I'll just take that one instead and just leave that one, because it's hot here. And so a lot of times they just go, there's no time in between. But that's why at the beginning of the rut is pretty good because there's not many in yet, so they're still moving around. They're checking all the field, the food plots, so being there checking for does and stuff. And then it's just shitty until you get towards like December 1st almost, and it's kind of the same thing again. Now most of them are bred already, so now they're just coming out because they got to eat. I got to eat. I've lost 30 pounds, and just still checking all those does out wherever they're at. So it's good in those, those 2 times. But for me, if I had any time, it'd be the first 10 days.
Well, it just so happens, Lee, I'll be moose hunting the first 10 days of October, so I will not make it.
Sorry to hear
for
that.
But yeah,
But like I said, if you're just coming here, of course you'd want to, because all my friends, they want to come in the rut too, because that's something you can. There's no other
anything
state
can
really.
Happen at that.
Yes, because you can shoot your giants. I've shot plenty of my big ones there in that time too. But, that's the time when you can rattle and they come running in. But a lot of time, most times they're like 2 or 3 year olds. But we rattled in our big ones when they're in between. Then that's easy. Like that one right third one up.
Yeah.
Like Tiffany shot that one, and he was big, wide spread, and he had like at 4 years old he was a 9, and he had split 2s, and then so that at 5, he's just kind of like a management deer kind of, but because he's big, but he's big, framey and showy, but just that he was a 9 point, and he's short 2s, but he had splits. But then at 5, he was a 9, but he didn't have any splits, and he was just bigger frame and bigger mass. But I was like, just leave him because he's got the genetic with the splits. He's going to put it back on. So then at 6, then he did that, and so he did the split. But like the one side, it looks like it's basically a 2 and a 3, but I think it was the split. It just came down really, really low on there. So now he basically has like the 4 is like his 3, so it's giant. I mean, so he's like 182 or something now, but he probably was maybe 155. Maybe was his best before that. So it's like I hunted him a couple times, and I saw him. One time he came right underneath the tree, but I couldn't. It was with Thomas, and he couldn't see down there. He's like right underneath. I can't see him. We could. And then he walked right through, and we never got a shot at him. But then I think I shot a different one, so I was like, "Hey, Tiffany, you go shoot that one." But then he just disappeared, and because he made it to rut, and he was probably one of the most dominant deer on that farm. So when we saw him back on cameras, we got like 2 food plots, and there's like a big ditch in between and timber, and then we got a big food plot on the south end. But we have little food plots that are right in the timber that I dozed out. And like the one night we saw him, like he was in both fields, on cameras. I was like, okay, he's in between. Let's go out there. But I was like, I don't want to go out there. Normally I'd go out with Tiffany and film, but I was like, I don't want to, try to rattle for you and stuff. And I want to enjoy it. I want to be sitting behind a camera to make sure everything's in focus and stuff.
Yeah.
So we went for the first time ever. We found a cedar tree out there, and I said, we'll go on this ridge here. I said, okay, we'll rattle him in right now. I mean, he'll come in if he's in between for sure. But just most time, I mean, they won't pay any attention if they got a doe. But I said, we knew he was in between the night before. So we went out, and so there's a series of ridges. And I said, okay, if we're going to rattle, we want to make sure we're on a ridge where they can't see behind, because they're old deer are smart. They're not gonna come in. They come to 100 and they'll sit there and look at you. If it's wide open, they don't see anything. So we pick these ridges, and if there's one cedar tree on there, so we put 3 stands in there. So Keegan was up on top, and then Tiffany, and then me over here. So I said, I don't want to film. Keegan can film, and I want to rattle. So right away, I hit the rattling antlers, and it was the next morning, and first of all, when I rattled, we had that big one come in. I left for Tom, my buddy Tom that I was talking about. Yeah. It was like a 190. He walked right, rally came right underneath us. I said, you can't. I'm saving that one for Tom. I mean, because he doesn't get to hunt that often, and he only has gun hunts. So it's like, we can't just, we got to leave that one for him, because that was one that he passed the year before and stuff. So it's like, yeah, let's leave that one. So then I hit the antlers again a little bit later. And a bunch of some does came and bucks came running, and like they're chasing does, and then there he is. He's down on the next ridge over, but he came running up, and all the does and stuff came running right to us, and the bucks too. But he stayed back there, but he had kind of ran him a little bit and just checked. And he was smelling on that ridge. He's like, nah, none of these are hot, So he just didn't care. He left. So it's just like he just walked back down. It's okay. We got to let him go, and let him get long enough so that they're still within earshot, but I don't want him to be anywhere where he can see us. Let him get away, leave him a couple minutes. And so even though we had some of the smaller bucks were still kind of around us, and they probably could see us, but I didn't care. I said, well, spook him out of here or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I hit him again, and whoosh, he comes up on our ridge now this time, but then it just stopped, But all those deer had kind of ran off, so he didn't know. But there was another buck down there too, like 2 smaller bucks. But now he's looking at this way on the ridge, and not from this way is what you want, But it was just too bad that all those other bucks and stuff were in there, because you could see them, and you already smelled that there wasn't. But if those other bucks weren't there, that there's a steep ridge behind us, I think he would think maybe something was down there, and he probably came. But he could see all those deer, and he's like, I'm not doing that. So then he came up like about 100 yards down there, and he was just looking at us. But the little buck was there too, and they're just kind of looking up there. But now they're looking up the ridge, so they can see there's nothing up there. I was like, dang it. So just waiting for us. And then he started, when he starts to lose interest, I said, let him lose his interest for a minute, and then I'll hit him with a snort wheeze. And so, so he turned away for a second and started walking away, and then give him a snort wheeze, and the little buck comes up right away. So he's standing there, he's like, dang, I got to do it. And he just comes up and he just comes walking right alongside, and she just torched him right there. And it was like one of the funnest hunts because, it's that time when you have a mature buck like that, like I said, 90% of the rut, 99% of the rut, they're not going to care about any fighting or rattling. They got a doe. If you find that one day or two that they're in between, then you got them because they're not going to tolerate. They are not going to tolerate somebody taking one of the does there. So that's when the cameras really helped us on that. I knew he was in between because he was on both those. There's big ridges and stuff in between those two little food plots. He was on both of them, hitting all the scrapes and stuff. So I know he's in between. So that was probably one of my funnest hunts ever, just to be able to sit there with her and with three of us at a tree. First time ever having three stands in the tree. And, and it just worked out because it was the same thing. We called it again. It was just like, we'll shoot him tomorrow. Let's go. I'm going to get up there. I'm going to rattle him.
You called rattling him. Like that's
So, and it worked beautifully. It was awesome footage and awesome deer. And
gosh, that is so awesome. And how, like you said, not very often do you guys really get to hunt together
we used to all the time. That's the way we started. And so I still film her quite a bit, like over the holidays especially. And we almost always shoot when like Thanksgiving or Christmas, like whenever all our guys go home and say, let's just you and I go out. And we almost always will kill one, do that. Almost always, when it's just the two of us. And those are good times of year too.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving's always going to be good. Christmas is always going to be good, especially if you get cold weather. So so we still do that. I still go up with her and film, but we don't get to every day like we used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a lot of good stories over the 20 years of cool stuff we've seen and fights and just some amazing things we've seen over the years. I remember sitting on the creek. I was just talking like Nate and say, we got to pull that footage up because there's so much stuff now that, maybe people that are my age and stuff when we first started had seen that. Like even Gnarls Barkley was probably like one of the most famous deer ever, back then. But there's probably kids that shot that deer is almost 20 years ago. So
is it really that long ago?
Probably. I mean, I was still in getting close days, and that was only the first 4 years. Really? I don't even think it was a crush. I think it was getting close still back then. So that would have been sometime between 2005, maybe, or shot in 2005. So it's almost 20 years.
Wow.
So
I remember that like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And so, but there's kids now that are hunting that's never even heard of that, So you could probably put some of those things back out there. But I remember one time Tiffany and I were sitting there and we were just I had to stand on a creek, just a small one, maybe like 6 feet wide, but water was flowing through it. And this buck was up there, and a nice buck too. But when we didn't shoot, he was like maybe 150s or 60s at the time, But I thought he was like a 4-year-old, but like a 10. But I remember he had kickers off his twos. He was just running this doe up the hill, so they're almost like above us even on that hill. And he was just like running like crazy. It was awesome. He comes running down the hill and splash right in the creek, right below us. He just left the doe and just runs down there and lays there. He's there and he's just. You see him just huffing and puffing like that, but up to his neck in water, just laying in there, just cooling off, and just right underneath us. And he just sat there for a few minutes, and then got up and chasing her again just to cool off. And then on that same farm, we had a big pond there, and we had does that was like a power line. And we dozed all this stuff and made a big food plot there. But there was a big pond that we had on the other side. And a buck just chasing the doe around, and the doe splash jumps in the water, and he splash right behind her, and she's swimming around circles in that thing, and he's chasing her, swimming in circles around that whole thing. Just stuff just cool stuff that we've seen over the years that just that we have footage of that from over the years. I said we got to crack some of that out again. That's the nice thing about having that kind of an archive of stuff. We got so many cool things.
Oh, I'd love to see that recirculating that on YouTube and like being able to go back and watch. Like that's cool because I know that's something watching that you guys have put a lot of emphasis in recent years is putting more on YouTube and everything there and honestly I feel like that is something that was kind of rare to see from the I guess I call it TV era days of not as many people transition, but you guys have done it really well. And
we just started like a year and a half ago really. Because you knew you had to do it. We've been talking about it for years, and then you just, we threw a couple things out there, but finally just like it was 2 years ago, I said, I'm going to hire a different team of guys just for that because, more and more people are going to YouTube and social media rather than TV. Although TV is really making a stronger comeback now that like the outdoor channel has done a good job now of getting out. It's on Samsung TV. Like we got a Samsung here now. Now you can watch the outdoor channel anytime you want on Samsung. It's free, where it used to be an add-on and stuff like that. So
okay.
They just kind of got like, we were very pleasantly surprised because you just didn't know where TV was going, and but like, okay, what sponsors still need to get, companies need to get word out. How do you advertise? Because like magazines aren't like what they used to be. If TV's not what it's going to used to be, and like the things that people like on YouTube or a lot of stuff isn't like, it's not professionally. What you look for on there is not like professionally shot and not with commercials in it and stuff. Of course, YouTube puts commercials in there, but not like your like product stuff. So like being because being on the manufacturing side as well, like I said, you have a company. We've had we have stuff even now like with analogics and stuff like that. It's like you have to have a way to advertise still. So I was pleasantly surprised to see like now they started being able to get the ratings, like a Nielsen rating for streaming stuff too, and it was way higher than we thought. Many millions more on that. So I think a lot of people are finding it on, and if you haven't, you can see, you can look through all that stuff and see all this, there's great TV shows out there, learning stuff. People, of the TV shows have been around for a long time, but it's just free on Samsung TV. You can just go and look on the outdoor.
I didn't even know that. That's awesome.
Yep. So I think once you get that word out there, because it is hard, because it's funny because like over all those years in TV, people, even us, everyone that watches TV, commercial again. And people like kind of zoom past them, but then if you're a hunter and also you're not seeing any of that new product stuff, you miss out on a lot of stuff. You realize how, because companies put a lot of time and effort into commercials, making them interesting and to show products and show, it was, you took it for granted back then. You just kind of wanted to zoom through it. But now that you don't have any of that stuff, like we just started getting like Bow Hunter magazine again. Tiffany I just looked at yesterday when I was in Montana. I had a plane looking at that thing, and just a lot of products. I was like, oh man, this is awesome, man. I got to look at this. Stuff like it was different. Like when I worked at the archery shop, you had the ATA show every year, and the TV shows and commercials. This stuff was rammed down your throat. But now I don't see any of it. It's like, man, I never saw these things. So it's nice. I think it might go back to some of that, just that. Because you're missing out on a lot of things. Like I always say, it's like, look at, like when I was a kid and maybe even like your age, like there wasn't a person that didn't know Will Primos.
Yeah.
I mean,
agreed.
I mean, it was the most it was as well known as, for me, as the president. I mean, you knew everyone from Primos. But now without that, I mean, there's probably kids today that never heard of Will Primos. But it's because you don't see the shows, you don't see the commercials. You might know some of the YouTube guys or whatever. But I still think you're missing out on, I think kids today are missing out on a big portion of what's out there. And like I said, especially if they're looking at just for entertainment value rather than learning stuff. And that's what we kind of started, like our summer series stuff. We want to still show hunts. Everybody wants to see that. But you try to do stuff that, that can teach people like how been successful, some of the things that we have to do, just some of the stuff we talked about today, about like, a deer, you're not going to see the vitals most of the time on that. Most people are like, what? And that's, that's something that somebody will hear that and have a deer on their wall probably next year because just by hearing that. But those are the things I think people are missing. Kids today are missing, just looking to like YouTube for entertainment value and not getting a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, like the work and stuff that we talked about, what it takes to go into that stuff, like us and TV and stuff over 20 years. People got to see a lot of that, but still not as much. That's why a lot of our YouTube stuff in the summer focuses on what we're doing. That's where our guys are coming. Tomorrow we're doing we got like multiflora rows everywhere, the thorn stuff, and how are you going to kill that? And so I got a friend of mine from Illinois, Michael Brenner, who's like, does so much of the TSI work for the state of Illinois and stuff. And he's awesome. We have a big place down there, and he's doing all that stuff. So even though we've done some of this stuff, I want to hear it from him. Like, I don't necessarily know the chemicals that he used to kill that, he will use to kill that, and the process that he'll use to kill that, and how do you kill that without killing other trees, and so how do you get rid of that stuff? And we've done in the past, like mostly from burning through the timber and stuff to get rid of some of that, but still doesn't get all of it. It has to burn pretty hot to kill it and stuff. So I'm really kind of interested to see, how he does all that stuff. And then we'll do some more of the TSI stuff, because we've done tons of TSI over the years, but is it right? I don't know. I want to see his opinion. And see what he thinks. I think it works. I mean, for stuff that we've done and stuff, you see a deer using it and it's thicker and I got more browse, but I want to see what he has to say about it. But those are things that if I'm interested in, I'm sure a lot of other people are too.
Yeah, 100%.
And, we always, like last year we would do stuff on frost seeding and stuff, which we didn't do it this year because you figure, well, most people know that. But then sometimes you think, well, I'm not going to never do it again because there's a 15-year-old kid out there right now that maybe hasn't even started hunting yet that's going to next year and has never even heard of frost seeding for clover and stuff like that. So you don't want to just keep rehashing things, but you want to give stuff you can't forget about. There's kids coming up today that don't know anything, haven't seen it yet and need to know even the basic stuff, as well as the guys have been doing it like us for 20 years. They're still learning new stuff.
And even things that you've heard before or seen, sometimes you need that reminder. I know that even for myself, and I've learned it from the podcast. It's like there's certain things I'm like, over the last 7 years, I know I've talked about it, 20 times, and it's like I'll still get people to reach out and be like, oh, I just heard this on this episode. I'm like, I thought I didn't even want to say it because it was something we've talked about so many times, but you think about it, there's only so many eyeballs that are seeing it. There's new people coming in all the time, or sometimes
you just don't want to you don't want to overlook some of the stuff because you maybe think it's too hashed over, a scrape, a rubs, and like that. But there's kids that are just starting out that don't know anything about that, so you don't want to overlook all that. But I just like to new stuff because I'm learning stuff all the time. We spent so many years on food plots and stuff, that kind of stuff, and now in the last 5 or 8 years, we've been really working on timber stuff, and getting for not just bedding, but the browse. If you figure a deer, no matter what kind of food you have, 80% of their diet's going to be a browse anyway. You can have all you want out in the fields, 80% is going to be browse in there. So, how do we improve that? How do we get more nutrition to them in the browse? How do we get water sources? We found that, like if we have, and luckily here in Iowa, we can feed. And some people call it think it's baiting or whatever. We can't do it in the hunting season, so it's not baiting, but it's not that at all. It's like, if I was going to put just corn in a feeder, why? It'd be a waste of my time and money. There's corn and beans, alfalfa, everything everywhere. I mean, maybe some for some inventory, but that's our one opportunity for us. That's why at Analogics, they're basically an animal science. That's what they were first. Animal labs, creating cures for all different diseases and mostly in livestock type animals. And that's what their main company was. And so just kind of as a hobby, so like they're out of Minnesota. They were. Now they did Pradco bought them out. But, the state of Minnesota would come to them. We got EHD. We need a vaccine for if there's a high fence herd or a captive herd. How do we do it? So, it's easy to make. So they started looking at, okay, so all the, like if you have, hear all the antibiotics, and we don't want any antibiotics in chickens, and I don't want any hormones in, animal in your meat and all that stuff. So it's not like they're not going to have any antibiotics for chickens. And okay, well, we're going to raise chickens and 2/3 of them are going to die and we'll sell the 1/3 of them. No, they get antibiotics, but through natural means. They use like the probiotics and prebiotics and essential oils and all that stuff. So that's what, the parent company basically of Analogics for all those years spent so much time and money finding all these different natural occurring like substances, oils and things like that would mimic the chemical part, because they made all the vaccines for these things and they made all the antibiotics and they made all that stuff in the previous years, but now they don't want hormones and stuff in them. So now we got to mimic this. These antibiotics we made, but in natural things. And so that's what they do now. So you never hear about so much anymore, like chickens dying or turkey farms dying. I mean, you hear like bird flu and stuff like that, but you're not hearing them, dying of just the normal things that they would, where they used to use antibiotics. But now so they figure that out. So they say, okay, let's do this for EHD. Let's make it the natural occurring things. See if we can kind of all those things that we did all this research on. We spent millions of dollars in the in farm animal stuff that had the funding for it. Farming is a huge business. So for cattle and for chickens and all that stuff for your food supplies, they spent millions doing that because it was worth it on that. But it's not worth it to do it for deer. But now they've already done that. So they say, okay, well now we've made the vaccine for EHD. Now what are these things that we've went through all these things doing for in the hog and cattle side? How can we make like an EHD vaccine? So they've done that, and that's why we haven't had near the number of EHD cases as like neighboring stuff has. And the only thing is you can't, like a deer that just comes in, never had any, and you just don't know how much each one of them's eating, so you can't like dose them. It's not like you can take like a captive deer and give them an injection and stuff. You know exactly. So you
can't
just
like you in the morning
the best you
taking
can.
2 multivitamins. It's like
right,
you can't.
Right. So, but it works. I mean, I got 100 examples. We could do a whole other podcast just on that, because we've had so little EHD in the places that I've spent a lot of time trying to combat it, and compared to even neighboring farms that have just totally wiped out just across the fence. And on our side, none of them have. Unfortunately, it's expensive. When you got a lot of farms and stuff, you start spending $100,000 and over $100,000 a year just on feed to make the pellets and roasted soybeans and soy oil and stuff like that. And it's just like, I did it for several years, but then like especially like last year when we lost some, it was like so wet all year, and say, okay, we shouldn't have any EHD this year, so I can cut back on that a little bit because I don't want to go bankrupt trying to save all our deer,
Yeah.
And so then, of course, it turns off dry at the end, and it's too late, So that's I was talking about these ones that we lost. I was like, gosh, I should have just kept feeding that, more. But you just got to kind of, it's like any business, you got to weigh your options on the things. And people think, oh, they're sponsored, you get everything free. It's not. Everything's not free. You might get even if it's a discount or whatever, and the trucking and everything. It's still very expensive to do all that.
Yeah.
If I just had one farm, so I think I'm going to just focus on, certain farms like my home farm, stuff like that, and make sure I'd never, no matter what, just keep that going. And of years, if it turns off dry at the beginning, it's going to then do it everywhere. And but you really can combat that with health, and that's what we're talking about, like feeders and things. It's like certainly don't need one to feed them. You don't need them to kill them. You don't need any of that stuff. You never would want to. Like we were talking earlier, it's just I want more of a challenge. But in the summertime, if I have a way I can keep them healthy, and you can do some things, with feed to help them survive, and that's there's so much money and stuff in CWD that I don't think is going anywhere. I don't think we're learning anything. I don't think they're making any improvements on it, and it's people will badmouth me for that. This is just my opinion. I just think there's so few that die from that, and when they get that, they can live for years. And what's the average lifespan of a deer anyway? I mean, an average lifespan, if you took the whole United States, probably 3 years old. And they live way longer than that with CWD. It's almost like, the way I understand it anyway, it's kind of like AIDS. You can have that for years. You might not ever come about, and you might get, get the actual HIV, go to AIDS, and then other people died from it. But you could have HIV for years before it showed up. And I think, like, from what I understand, is CWD is kind of the same way. So it's not affecting your deer numbers as much because they're still living, they're still breeding and all that stuff, and they have it, and then they may die. They might die young, they might die old, whatever. But it's not 40% of your deer herd in the state dying at one time. That's what I think. Not that it's like CWD is not a problem, but I see a more pressing problem with EHD, where you're losing entire counties basically wiped out.
Yeah.
And stuff. I mean, as a hunter and as a sportsman, I mean, that's what's affecting me more. Not that you don't want to still, think about the other stuff, but it seems like it's been 20 years almost with the CWD stuff, and they've done everything with killing all the animals and all that stuff. And it just doesn't seem to make much difference. It seems like they do the testing now, and it's the same as it was 20 years ago. We find 3 in this county, we found 4 in this state, whatever. It doesn't seem to change any. And it seems like the only way they're dying is mostly from killing them all because they say it's a CWD area. It's not CWD killing them. It's a DNR going and shooting all of them, or letting all the people shoot them all and ruin it. I just think of all the place like if our farms were, if Iowa did something like that, I just how horrified I'd be is that you spend all this time and money on these deer that you just love, and somebody's come in and just they want you to kill every one of them.
Yeah,
it's like, and I don't see any huge improvement on areas that they've done that. So I just think maybe they take some funding from that and go to the EHD side, because I'm pretty sure that you could probably do some stuff with ivermectin stuff that you see all that they do, and that doesn't cattle, keeping all the bugs off them and ticks off them, and just overall health. And as I kind of think that EHD, we've seen it now, that how many of them can live through it, like the years that we feed and they have, you can see their hooves crack and that stuff, and if they get infected, it's over. But a lot of times they just get cracky and their feet don't get infected and they live through it fine. I think it's kind of like COVID too. Most people didn't die from COVID, they died with COVID, from other things. The healthy people didn't die from it. It was somebody that was already. So I think a lot of it, the EHD on these deers is when they go into the rut and late season, they just get so wore down, and that's why some of them are dying later. But what if you could have done something like in feed wise, that I know you can't medicate wild animals. That's why you can't use ivermectin or that kind of stuff that you use like for cattle. But if they did some research on that and figure that you could, and say, all right, we're going to allow it now because of this, and we're just going to try to get past this figure out something that we can do for this EHD thing. So I think there could be a lot of progress made in that, because that's what's affecting sportsmen and hunters and everything from land values to everything from that, where CWD is not just not a problem, but it's not the same kind of problem. It's not wiping out 50% of your state in a year.
Yeah. And I can't say I can weigh in a lot on it from having any experience, but just from hearing and talking to many, it seems like EHD is taking over a lot of states and a lot of places.
Places where it never was before, so that's definitely changing. So what is it? And it's I think that the midge is like, it's like a tick that, ticks aren't born with Lyme disease. They get it from rodents or squirrels or whatever. So I think, the same thing with the midge when it hatches. And the thing is, like mosquitoes, you can do something for mosquitoes, because they lay their eggs in water. You can treat the water so the eggs it kills the larvae or whatever. But with the midge, they burrow in the mud and you have no way to penetrate that. So the only thing, once they're alive, okay, we fog and we do all kinds of like that. But that's a shot in the dark. I mean, what are your chances of getting every one of them? Like I said, if you could kill them in larvae stage, like in water, because if that's the only place that they bred, easy.
Yeah.
But now it's just in mud and you can't penetrate. They're born every day. You can't be out fogging and spraying stuff every single day, on that stuff. And then what other things are you killing if you're, spraying to kill those and everything else? So, it's like, okay, so where are they getting it from? Are they getting it from livestock? Because it seems like a place where there's cattle around is worse. They get it from that. Is there something that you can say, okay, well, we're going to spend this money. We're going to give, ivermectin or whatever to cattle farmers, so their cattle stay clear of the virus or whatever, and that they're not going to get it. Maybe that would trickle down to the deer. But you don't know all those things. Like, where are they getting it from? That's where I think more research could be done, and maybe make some progress in it, where it seems like they've been working on CWD it's been around for hundreds of years. Let's face it, it's been for everywhere. Thousands and thousands of animals have been eaten with CWD. They test a few a year. I've never had one tested. We eat deer, elk every day of the week. It's like, if there's likely we've eaten them with CWD, and a lot of people have. So obviously, if it transferred to humans or anything like that, we would have known by now. Let's face it, it's been around for hundreds of years. So it doesn't affect humans. It's not affecting the deer herds. It's not affecting the deer numbers. Not that it's not a problem. Don't get me wrong on that. I don't want to get a hate mail on that. I'm not saying it is, but to me, it's not the problem that EHD is.
Yeah.
EHD is affecting deer herds, and it's affecting everyone's hunting and all that. Like I said, you get over the western part of Iowa, and it's hardly far west, from what I understand, so there's hardly a deer left over there.
Yeah, so my buddy that I was scouting with today is from that area, and he was saying that he's like, I can't really hunt around home. There's not deer to hunt. So that was.
So to me, that's something. If I'm just a guy sitting here. But if I was, the DNR somewhere up there, or someone's politics here, I'd maybe start thinking about that. If there's funding for CWD, maybe we need to start changing that to EHD, because just all those things I talked about, where is it coming from? Are they getting it from rodents? Are they getting it from this? If we can't treat deer, is there something we can do that we can treat the rodents? You certainly can treat cattle.
Yeah.
Because if I was a farmer and if I had cattle and, hey, we got a program here that we got funding from the government that we're going to, ivermectin, whatever kind of could be, is free. You come and get it. You get this much free. Feed your cattle. Kind of keep them free of that. And we'll see if that helps EHD even in the dry years. It could be as easy as that. It might not be ivermectin, but I don't know all the things. What kind of different remedies they may have. But those are things that I think I would feel good about my tax money being spent on.
Yeah.
Figuring that out rather than spending it on CWD, because the way it sounds, if it is a prion disease and if you can't kill it, you can cook the soil to 3,500 degrees and it doesn't kill it and stuff. Well, then what are we doing? Obviously you're not going to, so just let it be. And I guess it is what it is, but I don't think it's as pressing of an issue as if it's not affecting humans and it's not affecting the deer herd. What are we doing? Let's get after EHD.
Yeah. You're not the only one I've heard say that. So
yeah, it's just like it's just our opinion. But I think that maybe it's time that we start focusing on that. You heard so much over the years about CWD, and you don't hear anything about EHD. But EHD is what's affecting everyone. It seemed like when it was just in Montana, it was just in the Milk River. You heard about that years ago, and it just affects them. But now it affects everybody. It's like, okay, that's a huge revenue source. It's a huge source of entertainment and leisure for so many Americans. It's like, okay, if that's affecting the whole United States now, maybe it's time that you start saying, hey, let's put some focus on it, because it may be an easy cure, where like it doesn't appear that CWD it doesn't appear like it has an easy cure.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were looking at it like maybe the cattle, like the hoof and mouth stuff or whatever. There's some of those bad mad cow disease stuff where they just had to kill the cattle and start over again. But that's cattle in your fence. It's like, you aren't doing that. If you think you're doing that to wild deer, you're crazy. You go in at somebody's high fence, you can't even freaking find a deer in there.
Yeah.
Cattle are easy to find. You can kill them all. Okay, let's start over. But that's not happening that way. And I don't know that that's the same disease. I don't think it's the same thing anyway. But there could be an easy, solvable solution to EHD. And it might not have to do anything with deer. Like I said, it might be cattle, rodents, anything else.
Yeah, and being able to put that focus, putting some money behind the research and stuff to let the people that are smart and intelligent with it to go through and figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Like these labs, like I said, the parent company lab of Analog, they could figure it out and no problem. If you could feed it, if you could feed it legally, but you can't. So they have to try to do it all natural ways, but then you don't know what kind of dosage they're going to get and all that kind of stuff. If you could make, put an actual, vaccine into every pellet where, every time they eat something, they're going to get a good dose of it, because obviously the natural stuff can emulate it, but it's not like, having a full-blown vaccine.
Yeah, not the same.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to do some research on that and to see if you could cure it.
Yeah.
You could take a captive herd and expose them to it, and you'd find out what can get rid of it and what can, if you start with it, what can prevent it, what can get rid of it, all that kind of. You could solve that with EHD.
Yeah,
and which I don't know that you can. Apparently, you can't with CWD. You've been working on it long enough.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Lee, I think we'll wrap this one up.
We haven't solved all the world problems yet, but
we've solved a few.
We got to start on it.
I think we did pretty good. But no, I like I said, I just appreciate you allowing me to come out here and talk with you and go through all these things. Like it's awesome to be able to sit down and have these long form conversations from someone like, obviously people have known you from years through TV and now YouTube and social media and stuff. But I think when you get to sit down and have a long form conversation, you really get to know somebody.
Yeah, who they are.
You're
not just, a 20-minute deal on TV. I think I feel like people probably know us now. People have been watching for 20 years because we are, we are where we are. Not trying to hide anything. Just be the same on or off TV, no matter what. But I think what we should do is, since if you're going to get drawn this year again, we should do another one in hunting season, and it'd be great to do it again. Follow up on some of the things we didn't talk about, and see how their season's going. See if I want to see how it goes for your Pennsylvania boy out here in Iowa.
I would love it. So yeah, well, if I do good, then I'll be like, Lee, let's talk about it. If I don't, you won't hear from me. I'll just disappear. But
yeah, well, let's just hope that, like I said, sometimes the HD years that you get after that is when you get your biggest ones, because I think the social stresses and all that stuff go down, and that they can probably put on a lot after that. But let's just hope we don't have another, if we have a good wet year and stuff, you usually don't have too much to worry about it. But I just hope we don't have another dry year or something bad one, because it just stinks. I just feel sorry for people that you wait 6 years to get drawn, and you get on some of those years that just wipes everything out, and it just, you waited that long, and then just to have all the deer gone.
I don't even want to think about that, Lee. I'm just thinking positively. It's going to be.
The nice thing is, it's like the zones are big enough that EHD, when it hits, like we've got a dozen or more farms throughout, 30 miles one way to the other. And it usually hits in pockets, and it's never everywhere.
Yep.
And that's what I was saying, we had those 5 years from like 10 to 15 where it was like every year was bad. It was just drought years every year and bad. And so no one year wiped them all out. It was a cumulative effect over 5 years, and it got it down. But, some farms are affected, didn't lose any on farms the last 2 years, and then other ones lost a bunch.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about having like the zones down here are big. So if you got one place where there isn't any, you just move 10 miles and it'll be totally different.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have one specific place you're hunting, if you're just knocking on doors and looking at.
No, I've been just hitting a bunch of public places and just trying to hit as much as possible.
I mean, in Iowa, there's enough public places.
Yeah.
Like people think, public. Iowa public is not like other places public. Because I even think about that myself sometimes, going and hitting some of these public places, because like we were talking about earlier, no place around gets as much pressure as ours do.
Yeah. And
even on that, you have a lot of deer, and you have all the food plots, but some of those big ones, just like too much social stress, I'm out. And so like a lot of our neighbors will have bigger deer than we do, because, just we have a lot of deer, and they don't want to be around a lot of deer. So you think, man, I should just go and look in, some of these public places and look for some sign. There's probably some slobs in there. That's all I used to hunt when I first moved down here too.
Yeah.
It's as good as anything.
Yeah.
And a lot of places
they put stuff today.
They put fields in. A lot of the places here, they have big clover fields, and they let people farm it. And they can farm it, but they have to leave crops in through hunting season and stuff. So corn is even standing.
Yeah.
It can be really good. And I think we have one of our cameramen, James, and even though he could hunt here, he doesn't even want to. He's like, I just like hunting public stuff. I just like wandering around and stuff and trying to find something. I said, yeah, that's awesome. That's what I love about you too, because it's kind of the same as me. I don't want somebody to give it to me. I want to make it.
Yep.
And even though these farms are good now, but this is the house I built. Nobody gave it to me.
Yep.
Started. Nobody cared when it was, like I said, Elsie Craig's farm. That was an old one. I used Elsie's name a lot, but it was like nobody thought it was so special when Elsie Craig had it.
Yep.
So I like making it better and stuff. But it's like for James, he likes going out and finding the sign and putting in the miles and finding a big one and stuff in on public land and doing it that way. You know?
I don't care if public, private. It's just like the chase that we talked about and the fun of that. And that's what's...
Yeah, and the nice thing about Iowa is, and that's why, like I said, we have a turkey hunter coming here. We give, try to donate stuff to the Iowa sportsmen because they're really active here.
Yeah.
And they don't, like the politicians don't get to take advantage of stuff because they are so strong. There's so many of us because we understand what we have here that live here, and we don't take it for granted. And you look at the state, it's only 8% timber compared to like Illinois, so they're like 20%. There's not that much. So people that live here, if they were to open this up, everyone says, oh man, they need to let non-residents hunt there. It's like, no, you don't. You already have Missouri. You already have those states. Why aren't you going there? Why are you applying 5 years in a row instead of trying to get into Iowa? It's like you'd rather hunt Iowa once every 5 years than just have it like every place else. But because like I said, it's only 8% timber, and if they were to change that, there's no resident that would have a chance to hire to hunt anymore. because there's not that much here huntable stuff.
Yeah.
And so all the hunters that are here, they're very defensive about that, because if you did like Illinois, if you have 40 acres, you're considered a landowner, you can hunt your own. It would ruin it immediately. I mean, every 40 would be bought up with 6 guys hunting on it. It's like, whoop, I mean, we have big deer because there's not a lot of pressure, but we don't have the timber and the amount of land that can hold a lot of deer. It would kill it immediately. So like Skip, if you talk to him, they're very involved with it. Like they'll go on all like the new senators and new guys like that. And they're, no, we're going to open this up. Oh, really? This is why you're not going to, because everyone that votes for you, all these people that are coming in lobbying for you for like the crossbows and all that stuff, they come and want to pay you. And, oh, man, they can make it sound like it's a good deal. It's like, those aren't the people that vote for you. We're the people that vote for you. Trust me, if you open this thing up and ruin hunting for this entire state, you will be voted out next year. And so, oh, man. And so that's what it takes. But and not anything against these, like the politicians, they don't know anybody if they're not hunters.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in and lobbies them for crossbow stuff, but it's the same thing. It kind of, people talk about it. You can take that issue whatever side you want. Yeah, it's a lot more, people have opportunity to hunt and all that stuff. But you look at like Illinois, it's, for a lot of people say it's ruined it, because you get to so many people that, are taking advantage of what's supposed to be like a primitive weapons season. And now you got a weapon you don't have to practice, you don't have to put any time in, and people think they can shoot far, but they can't. They're not as accurate as a vertical bow. And so, they're shooting too long and wounding deer and stuff. But the biggest thing is, it's like if you want to have a season like that, it should be like I think it should be like a muzzleloader season. You can have your season for crossbow hunters. We want to make sure all those people get the chance to hunt and stuff, but it shouldn't be 3 months long where they don't have to practice. You don't have to put anything into it. You just get one crossbow and the whole family and go out and shoot it in 2 minutes. Okay, I'm dead on.
Yep.
At close range anyway. But it should be, okay, you have your gun season, you have a muzzleloader season, you should have a crossbow season for all those people get to. But that 3 months long, of archery season where it's supposed to be primitive weapons. And even though, like I said, I think you can be more accurate with the vertical bow, it still takes a lot of practice where it doesn't take any practice on that. So at least it's the people, if you want to put in the practice and hard work and stuff and get proficient with the bow, then you should be rewarded with that longer time, because it's a lot harder to do it. Where I think like a crossbow should be like a gun season. You can have its seasons for it, but not the entire season.
Yeah, and the problem I've seen with that, and when I was working the archery shop, and I don't remember when crossbows became legal in Pennsylvania, but I felt like it was really hitting a wave at that point, and it was just like people come in, they'd look at the box, oh, this could shoot 100 yards, so I could shoot deer 100 yards, and not understanding the body language of deer, not understanding all these things and then there's so many situations where I've heard of people of just. And not saying, again, bow hunters, we wound, we have problems, not saying that, but just going out, not putting in the work for it, and then just being negligent on things. And I don't really have
and I think it's kind of like
that.
For our kids, it gets them out hunting earlier, so you can use a crossbow, not during the archery season here, but you can in the gun season, like the late muzzleloader, you can. So I said, okay, that's fine. That's why they don't hunt all year. We have just a couple weeks at the end that they can use a crossbow. And I think that's fine, because they should have an opportunity to hunt when they can't hunt anything else, if they don't want to use a gun. Somebody like disabled, or, if you're, whatever, somebody that you're 80, 90 years old and you're not going to be able to pull that, they should have a season to be able to get out and do it. But the entire season, I don't think that's right, on that. And, like the accuracy part, like you said, people think, oh, I can shoot 100 yards. But in reality, you look at Vegas, you'll have, on a vertical bow, you'll have 60 people that shoot a clean 300, 300 X's. And it goes to how many iterations of people till they get down to that one person. There'll be 20 people that do it, and then there'll be 15 in the next one. There'll be 12. I mean, how many? By the time somebody wins Vegas, they probably went through so many iterations of never missing an X at 20 yards. But in the 15 years they've been doing the crossbow thing in Vegas, nobody has ever got a clean 300 ever.
Really?
Yeah. And so you think, oh, they're so accurate. All right. Well,
then
might be accurate sitting on a vise on your table, but you try to hold it like a vertical bow. Nobody's ever cleaned.
Well, then try to screw on a fixed blade broadhead on the end of it without going, grabbing them out of the pack, screwing them on, and going out and hunting.
Right.
Then you get to some other,
You don't hold that. But from the last that I heard when I asked about Vegas a couple of years ago, nobody had ever done it. Maybe somebody has since, but it's certainly not the half the field does it and then you iterate it down. It's like for all the years people doing that, nobody's ever cleaned it a 300 on it. A 300X.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't even know they did that. Honestly, that they shot crossbows in Vegas.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, all right. Now we're done. And Lee,
see. There's plenty more to go, so that's we'll do it again.
We'll come back, and we will. I will definitely come back, and we'll do another one. But for anyone that's listening, go follow along what Lee and Tiffany got going on. It's Lee and Tiffany on YouTube, right?
Yeah, you look under Lee and Tiffany Lakosky, and it'll come up.
Yeah, look for all the things: outdoor channel, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the places.
I think like on the social media stuff, it's like the Crush TV is probably like on. Instagram and that, but I think I know for our YouTube and stuff, you just look under Lee Tiffany Lakosky, and
I'll put links in the show notes to everything. But Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy.
This was a blast. Appreciate it. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.